Yeah. The office identified multiple contacts, links, in the words of the appointment order, between Trump campaign officials and individuals with ties to the Russian government. The office investigated whether those contacts constituted a third avenue of attempted Russian interference with or influence on the 2016 presidential election. In particular, the investigation examined whether these contacts involved or resulted in coordination or a conspiracy with the Trump campaign and Russia, including with respect to Russia providing assistance to the campaign in exchange for any sort of favorable treatment in the future. Based on the available information, the investigation did not establish such coordination. This section describes the principal links between the Trump campaign and individuals with ties to the Russian government, including some contacts with the campaign officials or associates that have been publicly reported to involve Russian contacts. Each subsection begins with an overview of the Russian contact at issue and then describes in detail the relevant facts in which are generally presented in chronological order, beginning with the early months of the campaign and extending through the post-election transition period.
All right, off we go. A, campaign period, September 2015 to November 8, 2016. Russian government-connected individuals and media entities began showing interest in Trump's campaign in the months after he announced his candidacy in June 2015. Because Trump's status as a public figure at the time was attributable in large part to his prior business and entertainment dealings, this office investigated whether a business contact with Russia-linked individuals and entities during the campaign period, the Trump Tower Moscow project, led to or involved coordination of election assistance. Outreach from individuals with ties to Russia continued in the spring and summer of 2016, when Trump was moving toward and eventually becoming the Republican nominee for president. As set forth below, the office also evaluated a series of links during this period, outreach to two of Trump's then recently named foreign policy advisors, including a representation that Russia had, quote, dirt on Clinton in the form of thousands of emails, dealings with a DC-based think tank that specializes in Russia and has connections with its government. That's number two. Number three, a meeting at Trump Tower between the campaign and a Russian lawyer promising dirt on candidate Clinton that was, quote, part of Russia and its government support for Trump, end quote. 4, events at the Republican National Convention. 5, post-convention contacts between Trump campaign officials and Russia's ambassador to the United States, and contacts through campaign chairman Paul Manafort, who had previously worked for a Russian oligarch and a pro-Russian political party in Ukraine.
3, Trump Tower Moscow Project. The Trump Organization has pursued and completed projects outside the United States as part of its real estate portfolio. Some projects have involved the acquisition and ownership through subsidiary corporate structures of property. In other cases, the Trump Organization has executed licensing deals with real estate developers and management companies, often local to the country where the project was located. Between at least 2013 and 2016, the Trump Organization explored a similar licensing deal in Russia, involving the construction of a Trump-branded property in Moscow. The project, commonly referred to as a Trump Tower Moscow or Trump Moscow project, anticipated a combination of commercial, hotel, and residential properties all within the same building. Between 2013 and June 2016, several employees of the Trump Organization, including then President of the organization Donald J. Trump, pursued a Moscow deal with several Russian counterparties. From the fall of 2015 until the middle of 2016, Michael Cohen spearheaded the Trump Organization's pursuit of a Trump Tower Moscow project, including by reporting on the project's status to candidate Trump and other executives in the Trump Organization.
A. Trump Tower Moscow venture with the Crocus Group. The Trump Organization and the Crocus Group, a Russian real estate conglomerate owned and controlled by Aris Agalarov, began discussing a Russian-based real estate project shortly after the conclusion of the 2013 Miss Universe pageant in Moscow. Donald J. Trump Jr. served as the primary negotiator on behalf of the Trump Organization. Emin Agalarov, son of Aris Agalarov, and Irakli Ike Kavalatsa represented the Crocus Group during negotiations with the occasional assistance of Robert Goldstone. In December 2013, Kavalatsa and Trump Jr. negotiated and signed preliminary terms of an agreement for the Trump Tower Moscow project. On December 23, 2013, after discussions with Donald J. Trump, the Trump Organization agreed to accept an arrangement whereby the organization received a flat 3.5% commission on all sales, with no licensing fees or incentives. The parties negotiated a letter of intent during January and February 2014.
From January 2014 through November 2014, the Trump Organization and Crocus Group discussed development plans for the Moscow project. Sometime before January 24, 2014, the Crocus Group sent the Trump Organization a proposal for an 800-unit, 194-meter building to be constructed at an Agalarov-owned site in Moscow called Crocus City, which had also been the site of the Miss Universe pageant. In February 2014, Ivanka Trump met with Emin Agalarov and toured the Crocus City site during the visit to Moscow. From March 2014 through July 2014, the groups discussed design standards and other architectural elements. For example, in July 2014, members of the Trump Organization sent Crocus Group counterparties questions about the demographics of these prospective buyers. In the Crocus City area, the development of neighboring parcels in Crocus City, and concepts for redesigning portions of the building. In August 2014, the Trump Organization requested specifications for a competing Marriott-branded tower being built in Crocus City. Beginning in September 2014, the Trump Organization stopped responding in a timely fashion to correspondence and proposals from the Crocus Group. Communications between the two groups continued through November 2014 with decreasing frequency. That appears to be the last. What appears to be the last communication is dated November 24th, 2014. The project appears not to have developed past the planning stage, and no construction occurred.
In the late summer of 2015, the Trump Organization received a new inquiry about pursuing a Trump Tower project in Moscow. In approximately September 2015, Felix Sater, a New York-based real estate advisor, contacted Michael Cohen, then Executive Vice President of the Trump Organization and Special Counsel to Donald J. Trump. Sater had previously worked with the Trump Organization and advised it on a number of domestic and international projects. Sater had explored the possibility of a Trump Tower project in Moscow while working with the Trump Organization, and therefore knew of the organization's general interests in completing a deal there. Sater had also served as an informal agent of the Trump Organization in Moscow previously, and had accompanied Ivanka Trump and Donald Trump Jr. to Moscow in mid-2000s. Sater contacted Cohen on behalf of IC Export Investment Company, IC Export, a Russian real estate development corporation controlled by Andrei Vladimirovich Rosov. Sater had known Rosov since approximately 2007, and in 2014 had served as an agent on behalf of Rosov during Rosov's purchase of a building in New York City. Sater later contacted Rosov and proposed that the IC Expert pursue a Trump Tower Moscow project in which IC Expert would license the name and brand from the Trump Organization but construct the building on its own. Sater worked on the deal with Rosov and another employee of the IC Expert. Cohen was the only Trump Organization representative to negotiate directly with IC Expert or its agents. In approximately September 2015, Cohen obtained approval to negotiate with IC Expert and candidate Trump. who was then president of the Trump Organization. Cohen provided updates directly to Trump about the project throughout 2015 and into 2016, assuring him the project was continuing. Cohen also discussed the Trump-Moscow project with Ivanka Trump as to design elements, because she likes to design things, such as possible architects to use for the project, and Donald J. Trump Jr. about his experience in Moscow and possible involvement in the project during the fall of 2015.
Also, during the fall of 2015, Cohen communicated about the Trump-Moscow proposal with Grigory Rizkaladze, a business executive who previously had been involved in a development deal with the Trump Organization in Batumi, Georgia, the country of the state. Cohen stated that he spoke to Rizkaladze in part because Rizkaladze had pursued business ventures in Moscow, including a licensing deal with the Agalarev-owned Crocus Group. On September 22, 2015, Cohen forwarded a preliminary design study for the Trump-Moscow project to Rizkaladze, adding, "I look forward to your reply about this spectacular project in Moscow," end quote. Rizkaladze forwarded Cohen's email to an associate and wrote, "If we could organize the meeting in New York at the highest level of the Russian government, and Mr. Trump, this project would definitely receive worldwide attention." On September 24, 2015, Rizkaladze sent Cohen an attachment that he described as a proposed letter to the mayor of Moscow from Trump Organization, explaining that we need to send this letter to the mayor of Moscow, second guy in Russia, wink wink. He is aware of the potential project and will pledge his support, end quote. In a second email to Cohen sent the same day, Rizkaladze provided a translation of the letter, which described the Trump-Moscow project as a symbol of stronger economic, business, and cultural relationships between New York and Moscow, and therefore United States and the Russian Federation. On September 27, 2015, Rizkaladze sent another email to Cohen proposing that the Trump Organization partner on the Trump-Moscow project with Global Development Group LLC, which he described as being controlled by Mikhail Posikin, a Russian architect, and Simon Nizaradze. Cohen told the office that he ultimately declined the proposal and instead continued to work with IC Expert, the company represented by Felix Sater. Subsection C. Letter of intent and contacts to Russian government, October 2015, January 2016. Subsection 1. Trump signs the letter of intent on behalf of the Trump Organization. Between approximately October 13, 2015 and November 2, 2015, the Trump Organization, through its subsidiary Trump Acquisition LLC and IC Expert, completed a letter of intent, or LOI, for a Trump-Moscow property. The LOI signed by Trump for the Trump Organization and Rozov on behalf of IC Expert was, and I quote, intended to facilitate further discussions, end quote, in order to, quote, attempt to enter into a mutually acceptable agreement, end quote, related to the Trump-branded project in Moscow. The LOI contemplated a development with residential, hotel, commercial, and office components, and called for approximately 250 first-class luxury residential condominiums, as well as one first-class luxury hotel consisting of approximately 15 floors and containing not fewer than 150 hotel rooms. For the residential and commercial portions of the project, the Trump Organization would receive between 1% and 5% of all condominium sales, plus 3% of all rental and other revenue. For the project's hotel portion, the Trump Organization would receive a base fee of 3% of gross operating revenues for the first 5 years and 4% thereafter, plus a separate incentive fee of 20% of operating profit. Under the LOI, the Trump Organization would also receive a $4 million upfront fee prior to groundbreaking. Under these terms, the Trump Organization stood to earn substantial sums over the lifetime of the project without assuming significant liabilities or financing commitments.
On November 3, 2015, the day after the Trump Organization transmitted the LOI, Sater emailed Cohen suggesting that the Trump-Moscow project could be used to increase candidate Trump's chances at being elected, writing,
"Buddy,
Our boy can become president of the USA, and we can engineer it. I will get all of Putin's team to buy in on this. I will manage this process. Michael, Putin gets on stage with Donald for a ribbon cutting for Trump Moscow, and Donald owns the Republican nomination and possibly beats Hillary, and our boy is in. We will manage this process better than anyone. You and I will get Donald and Vladimir on a stage together very shortly. That, the game changer.
Sick, yeah. Later that day, Sater followed up.
Donald doesn't stare down, he negotiates and understands the economic issues, and Putin only wants to deal with a pragmatic leader. And a successful businessman is a good candidate for someone who knows how to negotiate. Business, politics, whatever, it is all the same for someone who knows how to deal.
Followed by,
I think I can get Putin to say that at the Trump Moscow press conference. If he says it, we own this election. America's most difficult adversary agreeing that Donald is a good guy to negotiate? We can own this election. Michael, my next steps are very sensitive with Putin's very, very close people. We can pull this off. Michael, let's go. 2 boys from Brooklyn getting a USA president elected? This is good, really good.
That's for real, y'all.
right. According to Cohen, he did not consider the political import of the Trump Moscow project to the 2016 U.S. presidential election at the time. Cohen also did not recall candidate Trump or anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign discussing the political implications of the Trump Moscow project with him. However, Cohen recalled conversations with Trump in which the candidate suggested that his campaign would be a significant, quote, infomercial for Trump-branded properties.
Section 2. Post-LOI contacts with individuals in Russia. Given the size of the Trump Moscow project, Sater and Cohen believed the project required approval, whether express or implicit, from the Russian national government, including from the presidential administration of Russia. Sater stated that he therefore began to contact the presidential administration through another Russian business contact. In early negotiations with the Trump Organization, Sater had alluded to the need for government approval and his attempts to set up meetings with Russian officials. On October 12, 2015, for example, Sater wrote to Cohen that, quote, all we need is Putin on board and we are golden, and that a, quote, meeting with Putin and top deputy is tentatively set for the 14th of October, end quote. This meeting was being coordinated by associates in Russia and that he had no direct interaction with the Russian government. Approximately a month later, after the LOI had been signed, Lana Erkova emailed Ivanka Trump on behalf of Erkova's then-husband Dmitry Klokov to offer Klokov's assistance to the Trump campaign. Klokov was, at the time, Director of External Communications for PJSC Federal Grid Company of a Unified Energy System, a large Russian electricity transmission company, and had been previously employed as an aide and press secretary to Russia's energy minister. Ivanka Trump forwarded the email to Cohen. He told the office that, after receiving this inquiry, he had conducted an internet search for Klokov's name and concluded, incorrectly, that Klokov was a former Olympic weightlifter.
Between November 18th and 19th, 2015, Klokov and Cohen had at least one telephone call and exchanged several emails, describing himself in emails to Cohen as a trusted person who could offer the campaign political synergy and synergy on a government level. Klokov recommended that Cohen travel to Russia to speak with him and an unidentified intermediary. Klokov said that those conversations could facilitate a later meeting in Russia between the candidate and an individual Klokov described as our person of interest. In an email to the office, Erkova later identified the person of interest as Russian President Vladimir Putin. In the telephone call and follow-on emails with Klokov, Cohen discussed his desire to use a near-term trip to Russia to do site surveys and talk over the Trump-Moscow project with local developers. Cohen registered his willingness also to meet with Klokov and the unidentified intermediary, but was emphatic that all meetings in Russia involving him or candidate Trump, including a possible meeting between candidate Trump and Putin, would need to be in conjunction with the development of an official visit, with the Trump organization receiving a formal invitation to visit. Klokov had written previously that the visit by candidate Trump to Russia has to be informal.
Klokov had also previously recommended to Cohen that he separate the negotiations over a possible meeting between Trump and the person of interest from any existing business track. Re-emphasizing that this outreach was not done on behalf of any business, Klokov added in a second email to Cohen that, if publicized well, such a meeting could have phenomenal impact in a business dimension, and that the person of interest, most important support, could have significant ramifications for the level of projects and their capacity. Klokov concluded by telling Cohen that there was no bigger warranty in any project than the consent of the person of interest. Cohen rejected the proposal, saying that currently our letter of intent developer is in talks with VP's chief of staff and arranging a formal invite for the two to meet. This email appears to be their final exchange, and the investigation did not identify evidence that Cohen brought Klokov's initial offer of assistance to the campaign's attention, or that anyone associated with the Trump organization or the campaign dealt with Klokov at a later date. Cohen explained that he did not pursue the proposed meeting because he was already working on the Moscow project with Sater, who Cohen understood to have his own connections to the Russian government.
By late December 2015, however, Cohen was complaining that Sater had not been able to use those connections to set up the promised meeting with Russian government officials. Cohen told Sater that he was setting up the meeting myself. On January 11th, 2016, Cohen emailed the office of Dmitry Peskov, the Russian government's press secretary, indicating that he desired contact with Sergei Ivanov, Putin's chief of staff. Cohen erroneously used the email address instead of as the email apparently did not go through. On January 14th, 2016, Cohen emailed a different address, info@prpress.gov.ru, with the following message.
Dear Mr. Peskov, over the past few months, I have been working with a company based in Russia regarding the development of a Trump Tower Moscow project in Moscow City. Without getting into lengthy specifics, the communication between the two sides is stalled. As this project is too important, I am hereby requesting your assistance. I respectfully request someone, preferably you, contact me so that I might discuss the specifics as well as arranging meetings with the appropriate individuals. I thank you in advance for your assistance and look forward to hearing from you soon.
2 days later, Cohen sent an email to prpeskov@prpress.gov.ru, repeating his request to speak with Sergei Ivanov. Cohen testified to Congress and initially told the office that he did not recall receiving a response to the email inquiry and that he decided to terminate any further work on the Trump-Moscow project as of January 2016. Cohen later admitted that these statements were false. Fact. Cohen had received and recalled receiving a response to his inquiry, and he continued to work on and update candidate Trump on the project through as late as June 2016. On January 20th, 2016, Cohen received an email from Elena Polyakova, Peskov's personal assistant. Writing from her personal email account, Polyakova stated that she had been trying to reach Cohen and asked that he call her on the personal phone number that she provided. Shortly after receiving Cohen's Kovna's email. Cohen called and spoke to her for 20 minutes. Cohen described to Paul Sinova his position at the Trump Organization and outlined the proposed Trump Organization project, including information about the Russian counterparty with which the Trump Organization had partnered. Cohen requested assistance in moving the project forward, both in securing land to build the project and with financing. According to Cohen, asked detailed questions and took notes, saying that she would need to follow up with the others in Russia.
Cohen could not recall any direct follow-up from Polyakova or from any other representative of the Russian government. Nor did the office identify any evidence of direct follow-up. However, the day after Cohen's call with Polyakova, Sater texted Cohen asking him to, quote, "Call me when you have a few minutes to chat. It's about Putin. They called today," end quote. Sater then sent a draft invitation for Cohen to visit Moscow to discuss the Trump-Moscow project, along with a note to, quote, "Tell me if the letter is good as amended by me, or make whatever changes you want and send it back to me," end quote. After a further round of edits on January 25, 2016, Sater sent to Cohen an invitation signed by Andrei Ryabinsky of the company MHJ to travel to Moscow for a working visit about the prospects of development and the construction business in Russia, the various land plots available suited for construction of this enormous tower, and the opportunity to coordinate a follow-up visit to Moscow by Mr. Donald Trump. According to Cohen, he elected not to travel at the time because of concerns about the lack of concrete proposals about land plots that could be considered as options for the project. Section D. Discussions about Russia travel by Michael Cohen or candidate Trump, December 2015, June 2016. Subsection 1. Sater's overtures to Cohen to travel to Russia. The late January communication was neither the first nor the last time that Cohen contemplated visiting Russia in pursuit of the Trump-Moscow project. Beginning in late 2015, Sater repeatedly tried to arrange for Cohen and candidate Trump as representatives of the Trump Organization to travel to Russia to meet with Russian government officials and possible financing partners. In December 2015, Sater sent Cohen a number of emails about logistics for traveling to Russia for meetings. On December 19, 2015, Sater wrote,
"Please call me. I have Yevgeny Devoshkin on the other line. He needs a copy of your and Donald's passports. They need to scan at every page of the passports. Invitations and visas will be issued this week by VTB Bank to discuss financing for Trump Tower, Moscow. Politically, neither Putin's office nor Ministry of Foreign Affairs cannot issue invite, so they are inviting commercially, business. VTB is Russia's 2 biggest bank, and VTB Bank CEO Andrei Kostin will be at all meetings with Putin, so that it is a business meeting, not political. We will be invited to Russian consulate this week to receive invite and have visa issued."
In response, Cohen texted Sater an image of his own passport. Cohen told the office that at one point he requested a copy of candidate Trump's passport from Rona Graf, Trump's executive assistant at the Trump Organization, and that Graf later brought Trump's passport to Cohen's office. The investigation did not, however, establish that the passport was forwarded to Sater. Into the spring of 2016, Sater and Cohen continued to discuss a trip to Moscow in connection with the Trump-Moscow project. On April 20th, 2016, Sater wrote Cohen, quote, "The people wanted to know when you are coming, ? End quote. On May 4th, 2016, Sater followed up.
"I had a chat with Moscow. Assuming the trip does happen, the question is before or after the convention. I said I believe, but don't know for sure, that it's probably after the convention. Obviously, the pre-meeting trip, you only, can happen anytime you want, but the 2 big guys were sick the question. I said I would confirm and revert. Let me know about if I was right by saying I believe after Cleveland, and also when you want to speak to them and possibly fly over."
Cohen responded, quote, "My trip before Cleveland. Trump once he becomes the nominee after the convention," end quote. The day after this exchange, Sater tied Cohen's travel to Russia to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, hereafter Forum, an annual event attended by prominent Russian politicians and businessmen. Sater told the office that he was informed by a business associate that Peskov wanted to invite Cohen to the forum. On May 5th, 2016, Sater wrote to Cohen.
Peskov would like to invite you as his guest to the St. Petersburg Forum, which is Russia's Davos. It's June 16, 19. He wants to meet there with you and possibly introduce you to either Putin or Medvedev, as they are not sure if one or both will be there. This is perfect. The entire business class of Russia will be there as well. He said anything you want to discuss, including dates and subjects, are on the table to discuss.
The following day, Sater asked Cohen to confirm those dates would work for him to travel. Cohen wrote back, quote, "Works for me," end quote. On June 9th, 2016, Sater sent Cohen a notice that he, Sater, was completing the badges for the forum, adding, quote, "Putin is there on the 17th, very strong chance you will meet him as well," end quote. On June 13th, 2016, Sater forwarded Cohen an invitation to the forum signed by the director of the Roscongress Foundation, the Russian entity organizing the forum. Sater also sent Cohen a Russian visa application and asked him to send 2 passport photos. According to Cohen, the invitation gave no indication that Peskov had been involved in inviting him. Cohen was concerned that Russian officials were not actually involved or were not interested in meeting with him, as Sater had alleged, and so he decided not to go to the forum. On June 14, 2016, Cohen met Sater in the lobby of the Trump Tower in New York and informed him that he would not be traveling at that time. Section 2, Candidate Trump's opportunities to travel to Russia. The investigation identified evidence that, during the period the Trump-Moscow project was under consideration, the possibility of candidate Trump visiting Russia arose in 2 contexts. First, in interviews with the office, Cohen stated that he discussed the subject of traveling to Russia with Trump twice, once in late 2015 and again in spring 2016. According to Cohen, Trump indicated a willingness to travel if it would assist the project significantly. On one occasion, Trump told Cohen to speak with then-campaign manager Corey Lewandowski to coordinate the candidate's schedule. Cohen recalled that he spoke with Lewandowski, who suggested that they speak, again when Cohen had actual dates to evaluate. Cohen indicated, however, that he knew that travel to prior to the Republican National Convention would be impossible given the candidate's pre-existing commitments to the campaign. Second, like Cohen, Trump received and turned down an invitation to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. In late December 2015, Mira Duma, a contact of Ivanka Trump's from the fashion industry, first passed along invitations for Ivanka Trump and candidate Trump from Sergei Prokopko, a deputy prime minister for the Russian Federation. On January 14, 2016, Rona Graf sent an email to Duma stating that Trump was, quote, honored to be asked to participate in the highly prestigious forum event, but that he would have to decline the invitation given his very grueling and full travel schedule as a presidential candidate. Graf asked Duma whether she recommended that Graf send a formal note to the deputy prime minister declining his invitation. Duma replied that a formal note would be great.
It does not appear that Graf prepared that note immediately. According to written answers from President Trump, Graf received an email from Deputy Prime Minister Prigozhin on March 17, 2016, again inviting Trump to participate in the 2016 forum in St. Petersburg. 2 weeks later, on March 31, 2016, Graf prepared for Trump's signature a 2-paragraph letter declining the invitation. The letter stated that Trump's, quote, schedule has become extremely demanding, quote, because of the presidential campaign, and that the quote already had several commitments in the United States, close quote, for the time of the forum, but that he otherwise, quote, would have gladly given every consideration to attending such an important event. Graff forwarded the letter to another executive assistant at the Trump Organization with instructions to print the document on letterhead for Trump to sign. At approximately the same time that the letter was being prepared, Robert Forsman, a New York-based investment banker, began reaching out to Graff to secure an in-person meeting with candidate Trump. According to Forsman, he had been asked by Anton Kobyakov, a Russian presidential aide involved with the Roscongress Foundation, to see if Trump could speak at the forum. Forsman first emailed Graff on March 31st, 2016, following a phone introduction brokered through Trump business associate Mark Burnett, who produced the television show The Apprentice. In his email, Forsman referenced his long-standing personal and professional expertise in Russia and Ukraine, his work setting up an early, quote, private channel between Vladimir Putin and former U.S. President George W. Bush, and an approach he had received from senior Kremlin officials about the candidate. Forsman asked Graff for a meeting with the candidate, Corey Lewandowski, or, quote, another relevant person, end quote, to discuss this and other, quote, concrete things, end quote. Forsman felt uncomfortable discussing over, quote, unsecure email, end quote. On April 4th, 2016, Graff forwarded Forsman's meeting request to Jessica Macchia, another executive assistant to Trump.
With no response forthcoming, Forsman twice sent reminders to Graff, first on April 26th and again on April 30th, 2016. Graff sent an apology to Forsman and forwarded his April 26th email as well as his initial March 2016 email to Lewandowski. On May 2nd, 2016, Graff forwarded Forsman's April 30th email, which suggested an alternative meeting with Donald Trump Jr. or Eric Trump, so that Forsman could convey to them information that should be conveyed to the candidate personally or to someone the candidate absolutely trusts. To policy advisor Stephen Mueller. Get it out. No communications or other evidence obtained by the office indicate that the Trump campaign learned that Forsman was reaching out to invite the candidate to the forum, or that the campaign otherwise followed up with Forsman until after the election, which he interacted with. Which he interacted with the transition team as he pursued a possible position in the incoming administration. Stands young. When interviewed by the office, Forsman denied that the specific approach from senior Kremlin officials noted in his March 31st, 2016 email was anything other than Kobayakov's invitation to Roscongress. According to Forsman, the concrete things he referenced in the same email were a combination of the invitation itself, Forsman's personal perspectives on the invitation, and Russia policy in general, and details of a Ukraine plan supported by the U.S. think tank East-West Institute. Forsman told the office that Kobayakov had extended similar invitations through him to another Republican presidential candidate and one other politician. Forsman also said that Kobayakov had asked Forsman to invite Trump to speak after that other presidential candidate withdrew from the race, and the other politician's participation did not work out. Finally, Forsman claimed to have no plans to establish a back channel involving Trump, stating that the reference to his involvement in the Bush-Putin back channel was meant to burnish his credentials to the campaign. Forsman commented that he had not recognized any of the experts announced as Trump's foreign policy team in March 2016 and wanted to secure an in-person meeting with the candidate to share his professional background and policy views, including that Trump should decline Kobayakov's invitation to speak at the forum.
Part 2, George Papadopoulos.
George Papadopoulos was a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. From March 2016 to early October 2016. In late April 2016, Papadopoulos was told by London-based professor Joseph Mifsud, immediately after Mifsud returned from a trip to Moscow, that the Russian government had obtained dirt on candidate Clinton in the form of thousands of emails. 1 week later, on May 6th, which is my anniversary, 2016, Papadopoulos suggested to a representative of a foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information that would be damaging to candidate Clinton. Papadopoulos shared information about Russian dirt with people outside of the campaign, and the office investigated whether he also provided it to a campaign official. Papadopoulos and the campaign officials with whom he interacted told the office that they did not recall that Papadopoulos passed them the information. Throughout the relevant period of time, and for several months thereafter, Papadopoulos worked with Mifsud and 2 Russian nationals to arrange a meeting between the campaign and Russian government. That meeting never came to pass. In March 2016, Papadopoulos became a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. As early as the summer of 2015, he had sought a role as a policy advisor to the campaign, but in September 30th, 2015 email, he was told that the campaign was not hiring policy advisors. In late 2015, Papadopoulos obtained a paid position on the campaign of Republican presidential candidate Ben Carson. Ben Carson. Although Carson remained in the presidential race until early March 2016, Papadopoulos had stopped actively working for his campaign by early February 2016. At that time, Papadopoulos reached out to a contact at the London Centre of International Law Practice, which billed itself as a unique institution comprising high-level professional international law practitioners dedicated to the advancement of global legal knowledge and the practice of international law. Papadopoulos said that he had finished his role with the Carson. Oh wait. Campaign and asked if LCILP was hiring. In early February, Papadopoulos agreed to join that organization that he was working with and arrived in London to begin work.
As he was taking his position at LCILP, Papadopoulos contacted Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski via LinkedIn and emailed campaign official Michael Glassner about his interest in joining the Trump campaign. On March 2nd, 2016, Papadopoulos sent Glassner another message reiterating his interest. Glassner passed along word of Papadopoulos' interest to another campaign official, Joy Lutz, who notified Papadopoulos by email that she had been told by Glassner to introduce Papadopoulos to Sam Clovis, the Trump campaign's national co-chair and chief policy advisor. At the time of Papadopoulos' March 2nd email, the media was criticizing the Trump campaign for lack of experienced foreign policy or national security advisors within its ranks. To address that issue, senior campaign officials asked Clovis to put a foreign policy team together on short notice. After receiving Papadopoulos' name from Lutz, Clovis performed a Google search on Papadopoulos, they're just like us, learned that he had worked at the Hudson Institute and believed that he had credibility on energy issues. On March 3rd, 2016, Clovis arranged to speak with Papadopoulos by phone to discuss Papadopoulos joining the campaign as a foreign policy advisor, and on March 6, 2016, the two spoke. Papadopoulos recalled that Russia was mentioned as a topic, and he understood from the conversation that Russia would be an important aspect of the campaign's foreign policy. At the end of the conversation, Clovis offered Papadopoulos a role as a foreign policy advisor to the campaign, and Papadopoulos accepted the offer.
Subsection B, initial Russia-related contacts. Approximately a week after signing on as a foreign policy advisor, Papadopoulos traveled to Rome, Italy, as part of his duties with LCILP. The purpose of the trip was to meet officials affiliated with the Link Campus University, a for-profit institution headed by a former Italian government official. During the visit, Papadopoulos was introduced to Joseph Mifsud. Mifsud is a Maltese national who worked as a professor at the London Academy of Diplomacy in London, England. Although Mifsud worked out of London and was also affiliated with LCILP, the encounter in Rome was the first time that Papadopoulos met him. Mifsud maintained various Russian contacts while living in London, as described further below. Among his contacts was Redacted, a one-time employee of the RRA, the entity that carried out the Russian social media campaign. In January and February 2016, Mifsud and Redacted discussed Redacted possibly meeting in Russia. The investigation did not identify evidence of them meeting. Later in the spring of 2016, Redacted was also in contact with Redacted that was linked to an employee of the Russian Ministry of Defense, and that account had overlapping contacts with a group of Russian military-controlled Facebook accounts that included accounts used to promote the DC Links releases in the course of the GRU's hack and release operations.
y'all.
According to Papadopoulos, Mifsud at first seemed uninterested in Papadopoulos when they met in Rome. After Papadopoulos informed Mifsud about his role in the Trump campaign, however, Mifsud appeared to take greater interest in Papadopoulos. The two discussed Mifsud's European and Russian contacts and had a general discussion about Russia. Mifsud also offered to introduce Papadopoulos to European leaders and others with contacts to the Russian government. Papadopoulos told the office that Mifsud's claim of substantial connections with the Russian government officials interested Papadopoulos, who thought that such connections could increase his importance as a policy advisor to the Trump campaign. On March 17, 2016, Papadopoulos returned to London. 4 days later, candidate Trump publicly named him as a member of the Foreign Policy and National Security Advisory Team, chaired by Senator Jeff Sessions, also boo, describing Papadopoulos as an oil and energy consultant and, quote, excellent guy.
On March 24, 2016, Papadopoulos met with Mifsud in London. Mifsud was accompanied by a Russian female named Olga Polonskaya. Mifsud introduced Polonskaya as a former student of his who had connections to Vladimir Putin. Papadopoulos understood at the time that Polonskaya may have been Putin's niece, but later learned that this was not true. During the meeting, Polonskaya offered to help Papadopoulos establish contacts in Russia and stated that the Russian ambassador in London was a friend of hers. Based on this interaction, Papadopoulos expected Mifsud and Polonskaya to introduce him to the Russian ambassador in London, but that did not occur. Following his meeting with Mifsud, Papadopoulos sent an email to members of the Trump campaign's Foreign Policy Advisory Team. The subject line of the message was, quote, meeting with Russian leadership, .. including Putin, end quote. The message stated in pertinent part,
I just finished a very productive lunch with a good friend of mine, Joseph Mifsud, the director of the London Academy of Diplomacy, who introduced me to both Putin's niece and the Russian ambassador in London, who also acts as the deputy foreign minister. Footnote, Papadopoulos' statements to the campaign were false. As noted above, the woman he met was not Putin's niece. He had not met the Russian ambassador in London, and the ambassador did not serve as Russia's deputy foreign minister. The topic of the lunch was to arrange a meeting between us and the Russian leadership to discuss U.S.-Russia ties under President Trump. They are keen to host us in a neutral city or directly in Moscow. They said the leadership, including Putin, is ready to meet with us, and Mr. Trump should there be interest. Waiting for everyone's thoughts on moving forward with this very important issue.
Papadopoulos' message came at a time when Clovis perceived a shift in the campaign's approach toward Russia, from one of engaging with Russia through the NATO framework and taking a strong stance on Russian aggression in Ukraine, redacted, Clovis's response to Papadopoulos, however, did not reflect that shift. Replying to Papadopoulos and the other members of the Foreign Policy Advisory Team, copied on the initial email, Clovis wrote,
"This is most informative. Let me work it through the campaign. No commitments until we see how this plays out. My thought is that we probably should not go forward with any meetings with the Russians until we have had occasion to sit with our NATO allies, especially France, Germany, and Great Britain. We need to reassure our allies that we are not going to advance anything with Russia until we have everyone on the same page. More thoughts on this later. Great work."
Subsection C, March 31st, Foreign Policy Team Meeting. The campaign held a meeting of the Foreign Policy Advisory Team with Senator Sessions and candidate Trump approximately 1 week later, on March 31st, 2016 in Washington, D.C. The meeting, which was intended to generate press coverage for the campaign, took place at the Trump International Hotel. Papadopoulos flew to Washington for the event. At the meeting, Senator Sessions sat at one end of an oval table, while Trump sat at the other, as reflected in the photograph, which was posted on Trump's Instagram account. Papadopoulos sat between the two seats to Sessions' left. There he is. During the meeting, each of the newly announced foreign policy advisors introduced themselves and briefly described their areas of experience or expertise. Papadopoulos spoke about his previous work in the energy sector and then brought up a potential meeting with Russian officials. Specifically, Papadopoulos told the group that he had learned through his contacts in London that Putin wanted to meet with candidate Trump and that these connections could help arrange that meeting. Trump and Sessions both reacted to Papadopoulos' statement. Papadopoulos and campaign advisor J.D. Gordon, who told investigators in an interview that he had a crystal clear recollection of the meeting, had stated that Trump was interested in and receptive to the idea of a meeting with Putin. Papadopoulos understood Sessions to be similarly supportive of his efforts in a meeting, in an effort to arrange the meeting. Gordon and two other attendees, however, recalled that Sessions generally opposed the proposal, though they differ in their accounts of the concerns he voiced for the strength of the opposition he expressed.
D. George Papadopoulos learns that Russia has dirt in the form of Clinton emails. Whatever Sessions' precise words at the March 31st meeting, Papadopoulos did not understand Sessions or anyone else in the Trump campaign to have directed that he refrain from making further efforts to arrange a meeting between the campaign and the Russian government. To the contrary, Papadopoulos told the office that he understood the campaign to be supportive of his efforts to arrange such a meeting. Accordingly, when he returned to London, Papadopoulos resumed those efforts. Throughout April 2016, Papadopoulos continues to correspond with, meet with, and seek Russian contacts through Mifsud and at times Polinskaya. For example, within a week of her initial March 24th meeting with him, Polinskaya attempted to send Papadopoulos a text message, which email exchanges show to have been drafted or edited by Mifsud, addressing Papadopoulos' wish to engage with the Russian Federation. When Papadopoulos learned from Mifsud that Polinskaya had tried to message him, he sent her an email seeking another meeting. Polinskaya responded the next day that she was back in St. Petersburg but would be very pleased to support Papadopoulos' initiatives between our two countries and to meet him again. Papadopoulos stated in reply that he thought a good step would be to introduce him to the Russian ambassador in London, and that he would like to talk to the ambassador or anyone else he recommends about a potential foreign policy trip to Russia.
Mifsud, who had been copied on the email exchanges, replied on the morning of April 11th, 2016. He wrote, quote, "This has already been agreed. I am flying to Moscow on the 18th for a Valdai meeting, plus other meetings at the Duma. We will talk tomorrow." The two bodies referenced by Mifsud are part of or associated with the Russian government. The Duma is a Russian legislative assembly, while Valdai refers to the Valdai Discussion Club, a Moscow-based group that is close to Russia's foreign policy establishment. Papadopoulos thanked Mifsud and said that he would see him tomorrow. For her part, Zelenskaya responded that she had already alerted my personal links to our conversation and your request, that we are all very excited at the possibility of a good relationship with Mr. Trump, and that the Russian Federation would love to welcome him once his candidature would be officially announced. Papadopoulos' and Mifsud's mentions of seeing each other tomorrow referenced a meeting that the two had scheduled for the next morning, April 12, 2016, at the Andaz Hotel in London. Papadopoulos acknowledged the meeting during interviews with the office, and records from Papadopoulos' UK cell phone and his internet search history all indicate that the meeting took place.
Following the meeting, Mifsud traveled as planned to Moscow. On April 18, 2016, while in Russia, Mifsud introduced Papadopoulos over email to Ivan Timofeyev, a member of the Russian International Affairs Council, or RIAC. Mifsud had described Timofeyev as having connections with the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or the MFA, the executive entity in Russia responsible for Russian foreign relations. Footnote: during the campaign period, Papadopoulos connected over LinkedIn with several MFA-affiliated individuals in addition to Timofeyev. On April 25, 2016, he connected with Dmitry Andreyko, publicly identified as a first secretary of the Russian embassy in Ireland. In July 2016, he connected with Yuri Melnik, the spokesperson for the Russian embassy in Washington, and with Alexei Krasilnikov, publicly identified as a counselor with the MFA. And on September 16, 2016, he connected with Sergei Galobin, also identified as an MFA official. Redacted. Over the next several weeks, Papadopoulos and Timofeyev had several conversations over Skype and email about setting the groundwork for a potential meeting between the campaign and Russian government officials. Papadopoulos told the office that on one Skype call, he believed that his conversation with Timofeyev was being monitored or supervised by an unknown third party, because Timofeyev spoke in an official manner and Papadopoulos heard odd noises on the line. Timofeyev also told Papadopoulos in an April 25, 2016 email that he had just spoken to Igor Ivanov, the president of RIAC and former foreign minister of Russia, and conveyed Ivanov's advice about how best to arrange a Moscow visit. After a stop in Rome, Mifsud returned to England on April 25, 2016. The next day, Papadopoulos met Mifsud for breakfast at the Andaz Hotel, the same location as their last meeting. During the meeting, Mifsud told Papadopoulos that he had met with high-level Russian government officials during his recent trip to Moscow. Mifsud also said that on the trip he learned that the Russians had obtained dirt on candidate Hillary Clinton. As Papadopoulos later stated to the FBI, Mifsud said that the dirt was in the form of emails of Clinton, and that they have thousands of emails. On May 6, 2016, 10 days after the meeting with Mifsud, Papadopoulos suggested to a representative of a foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information that would be damaging to Hillary Clinton.
Section E. Russian-related communications with the campaign. While he was discussing with his foreign contacts a potential meeting of campaign officials with Russian government officials, Papadopoulos kept campaign officials apprised of his efforts. On April 25, 2016, the day before Mifsud told Papadopoulos about the emails, Papadopoulos wrote to senior policy advisor Stephen Miller that, quote, the Russian government has an open invitation by Putin for Mr. Trump to meet him when he is ready, end quote. And that, quote, the advantage of being in London is that these governments tend to speak a bit more openly in neutral cities, end quote. On April 27, 2016, after his meeting with Mifsud, Papadopoulos wrote a second message to Miller stating that, quote, some interesting messages were coming in from Moscow about a trip when the time is right, end quote. The same day, Papadopoulos sent a similar email to campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, telling Lewandowski that Papadopoulos had, quote, been receiving a lot of calls over the last month about Putin wanting to host Trump and the team when the time is right. Papadopoulos' Russian-related communication with campaign officials continued throughout the spring and summer of 2016. On May 4, 2016, he forwarded to Lewandowski an email from Timofeyev raising the possibility of a meeting in Moscow, asking Lewandowski whether that was, quote, something we want to move forward with. The next day, Papadopoulos forwarded the same Timofeyev email to Sam Clovis, adding to the top of the email, quote, "Russia update," end quote. He included the same email in a May 21st, 2016 message to senior campaign official Paul Manafort under the subject line, quote, "Request from Russia to meet Mr. Trump," end quote, stating that, quote, "Russia has been eager to meet Mr. Trump for quite some time and have been reaching out to me to discuss." Manafort forwarded the message to another campaign official without including Papadopoulos and stated, quote, "Let's discuss. We need someone to communicate that Trump is not doing these trips. It should be someone low level in the campaign so as not to send any signal," end quote.
On June 1st, 2016, Papadopoulos replied to an earlier email chain with Lewandowski about a Russian visit, asking if Lewandowski, quote, "wanted to have a call about this topic," end quote, and whether, quote, "we were following up with it," end quote. After Lewandowski told Papadopoulos to, quote, "connect with Clovis because he was, quote, running point," Papadopoulos emailed Clovis that the Russian MFA was asking him, quote, "if Mr. Trump is interested in visiting Russia at some point." Papadopoulos wrote in an email that, quote, "he wanted to pass this info along to you for you to decide what's best to do with it and what message I should send, parentheses, or to ignore." After several email and Skype exchanges with Timofeyev, Papadopoulos sent one more email to Lewandowski on June 19, 2016, Lewandowski's last day as campaign manager. The email stated that, quote, "the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs," end quote, had contacted him and asked whether, if Mr. Trump could not travel to Russia, a campaign representative such as Papadopoulos could attend meetings. Papadopoulos told Lewandowski that he was, quote, "willing to make the trip off the record if it's in the interest of Mr. Trump and the campaign to meet specific people."
Following Lewandowski's departure from the campaign, Papadopoulos communicated with Clovis and Walid Fares, another member of the Foreign Policy Advisory Team, about an off-the-record meeting between the campaign and the Russian government officials, or with Papadopoulos' other Russian connections, Misfud and Timofeyev. Papadopoulos also interacted directly with Clovis and Fares in connection with the summit of the Transatlantic Parliamentary Group on Counterterrorism, or TAG, a group for which Fares was co-secretary general. On July 16, 2016, Papadopoulos attended the TAG summit in Washington, D.C., where he sat next to Clovis, as reflected in the photograph here. Although Clovis claimed to have no recollection of attending the TAG summit, Papadopoulos remembered discussing Russia and the foreign policy trip with Clovis and Fares during the event. Papadopoulos' recollection is consistent with emails sent before and after the TAG summit. The pre-summit messages included a July 11, 2016 email in which Fares suggested meeting Papadopoulos the day after the summit to chat, and a July 12th message in the same chain in which Fares advised Papadopoulos that the other summit attendees are, quote, "very nervous about Russia, so be aware." 10 days after the summit, Papadopoulos sent an email to Misfud listing Fares and Clovis as other participants in a potential meeting at the London Academy of Diplomacy.
Is that me?
Nope. Finally, Papadopoulos' recollection is also consistent with handwritten notes from a journal that he kept at the time. Those notes, which are reprinted in part below, where's my left, appear to refer to potential September 2016 meetings in London with representatives of the Office of Putin, and suggest that Fares, Clovis, and Papadopoulos would attend without the official backing of the campaign, or no official letter or no message from Trump. Footnote: Papadopoulos declined to assist in deciphering his notes, telling investigators that he could not read his own handwriting from the journal. Papadopoulos, on September 19, 2017, the notes, however, appear to read as listed in the column to the left of the image above. Give everyone just a moment to look at that. Later communications indicate that Clovis determined that he, Clovis, could not travel. On August 15, 2016, Papadopoulos emailed Clovis that he had received requests from multiple foreign governments, even Russia, for closed-door workshops, consultations abroad, and asked whether there was still interest for Clovis, Ferris, and Papadopoulos to go on that trip. Clovis copied Ferris on his response, which said that he could not travel before the election, but that he would encourage Papadopoulos and Walid to make the trips, if it is all feasible. Papadopoulos was dismissed from the Trump campaign in early October 2016 after an interview he gave to the Russian news agency Interfax generated adverse publicity.
F. Trump campaign knowledge of dirt. Papadopoulos admitted telling at least one individual outside of the campaign, specifically the then Greek foreign minister, about Russia's obtaining Clinton-related emails. In addition, a different foreign government informed the FBI that 10 days after meeting with Mifsud in late April 2016, Papadopoulos suggested that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information that would be damaging to Hillary Clinton. This conversation occurred after the GRU spearfished Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta and stole his emails, and the GRU hacked into the DCCC and DNC. Such disclosures raised questions about whether Papadopoulos informed any Trump campaign officials about the emails. When interviewed, Papadopoulos and the campaign officials who interacted with him told the office that they could not recall Papadopoulos sharing the information that Russia had obtained dirt on candidate Clinton in the form of emails, or that Russia could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information about Clinton. Papadopoulos stated that he could not clearly recall having told anyone on the campaign, and wavered about whether he accurately remembered an incident in which Clovis had been upset after hearing Papadopoulos tell Clovis that Papadopoulos thought they have her emails. The campaign officials who interacted or corresponded with Papadopoulos have similarly stated, with varying degrees of certainty, that he did not tell them. Senior policy advisor Stephen Miller, for example, did not remember hearing anything from Papadopoulos or Clovis about Russia having emails or dirt on candidate Clinton. Clovis stated that he did not recall anyone, including Papadopoulos, having given him non-public information that a foreign government might be in possession of material damaging to Hillary Clinton. No documentary, is that me? That's me? No documentary evidence and nothing in the email accounts or other communications, thus the lifties reviewed by the office, shows that Papadopoulos shared this information with him.
Section G, additional George Papadopoulos contact. The office investigated another Russia-related contact with Papadopoulos. The office was not fully able to explore the contact because the individual at issue, Sergei Milyan, remained out of the country since the inception of our investigation and declined to meet with members of the office despite our repeated efforts to obtain an interview. Papadopoulos first connected with Milyan via LinkedIn on July 15, 2016, shortly after Papadopoulos had attended the TAG Summit with Clovis. Milyan, an American citizen who is a native of Belarus, introduced himself as, quote, as president of the New York-based Russian American Chamber of Commerce, and claimed that through that position he had insider knowledge and direct access to the top hierarchy in Russian politics. Papadopoulos asked Timofeyev whether he had heard of Milyan, although Timofeyev said no. Papadopoulos met Milyan in New York City. The meetings took place on July 30th and August 1st, 2016. Afterwards, Milyan invited Papadopoulos to attend and potentially speak at 2 international energy conferences, including one that was to be held in Moscow in September 2016. Papadopoulos ultimately did not attend either conference.
On July 31st, 2016, following his first in-person meeting with Millen, Papadopoulos emailed Trump campaign official Bo Didsis to say that he had been contacted by some leaders of Russian American voters here in the U.S. about their interest in voting for Mr. Trump, and to ask whether he should put you in touch with their group, U.S.-Russia Chamber of Commerce. Deniskis thanked Papadopoulos for taking the initiative, but asked him to hold off with outreach to Russian Americans because too many articles had already portrayed the then campaign chairman Paul Manafort and the candidate Trump as being pro-Russian. On August 23, 2016, Millian sent a Facebook message to Papadopoulos promising that he would share with you a disruptive technology that might be instrumental in your political work for the campaign. Papadopoulos claimed to have no recollection of this matter. On November 9, 2016, shortly after the election, Papadopoulos arranged to meet Millian in Chicago to discuss business opportunities, including potential work with Russian billionaires who are not under sanctions. The meeting took place on November 14, 2016 at the Trump Hotel and Tower in Chicago. According to Papadopoulos, the two men discussed partnering on business deals, but Papadopoulos perceived that Millian's attitude toward him changed. Papadopoulos stated that he was only pursuing private sector opportunities and was not interested in a job in the administration. The two remained in contact, however, and had extended online discussions about possible business opportunities in Russia. The two also arranged to meet at a Washington, D.C. bar when both attended Trump's inauguration in late January 2017.
All right, Section 3, Carter Page. Carter Page worked for the Trump campaign from January 2016 to September 2016. He was formally and publicly announced as a foreign policy advisor by the candidate in March 2016. Page had lived and worked in Russia, and he had been approached by the Russian intelligence officers several years before he volunteered for the Trump campaign. During his time with the campaign, Page advocated pro-Russia foreign policy positions and traveled to Moscow in his personal capacity. Russian intelligence officials had formed relationships with Page in 2008 and 2015, and Russian officials may have focused on Page in 2016 because of his affiliations with the campaign. However, the investigation did not establish that Page coordinated with the Russian government in its efforts to interfere with the 2016 presidential election.
Section A, background. Before he began working for the campaign in January 2016, Page had substantial prior experience studying Russian policy issues and living and working in Moscow. From 2004 to 2007, Page was the deputy branch manager of Merrill Lynch's Moscow office. There, he worked on transactions involving the Russian energy company Gazprom and came to know Gazprom's deputy chief financial officer, Sergei Yatsenko. In 2008, Page founded Global Energy Capital LLC, also known as GEC, an investment management and advisory firm focused on the energy sector in emerging markets. Redacted. The company otherwise had no sources of income, and Page was forced to draw down his life savings to support himself and pursue his business venture. Page asked Yatsenko to work with him at GEC as a senior advisor on a contingency basis. Redacted.
In 2008, Page met Alexander Bulatov, a Russian government official who worked at the Russian consulate in New York. Page later learned that Bulatov was a Russian intelligence officer. Redacted. In 2013, Viktor Podobny, another Russian intelligence officer working covertly in the United States under diplomatic cover, formed a relationship with Page. Podobny met Page at an energy symposium in New York City and began exchanging emails with him. Podobny and Page also met in person on multiple occasions, during which Page offered his outlook on the future of the energy industry and provided documents to Podobny about the energy business. In a recorded conversation on April 8, 2013, Podobny told another intelligence officer that Page was interested in business opportunities in Russia. In Podobny's words, Page got hooked on
wait for it, Gazprom, thinking that if they had a project, he could rise up. Maybe he can. It's obvious that he wants to earn lots of money. Podobny said that he had led Page on by, quote, feeding him empty promises, end quote. That Podobny would use his Russian business connections to help Page. Podobny told the other intelligence officer that his method of recruiting foreign sources was to promise them favors and then discard them once he obtained relevant information from them.
In 2015, Podobny and 2 other Russian intelligence officers were charged with conspiracy to act as an unregistered agent of a foreign government. The criminal complaint detailed in Podobny's interactions with and conversations about Page, who was identified only as Male 1. Based on the criminal complaint's description of the interactions, Page was aware that he was the individual described as Male 1. Page later spoke with a Russian government official at the United Nations General Assembly and identified himself so that the official would understand he was Male 1 from Podobny complaint. Page told the official that he didn't do anything, redacted. In interviews with the FBI before the office's opening, Page acknowledged that he understood that the individuals he had associated with were members of the Russian intelligence services, but he stated that he had only provided immaterial, non-public information to them and that he did not view this relationship as back-channel. Page told investigating agents that the more immaterial, non-public information I give, the better for this country.
B. Origins of and early campaign work. In January 2016, Page began volunteering on an informal, unpaid basis for the Trump campaign after Ed Cox, a state Republican Party official, introduced Page to Trump campaign officials. Page told the office that his goal in working on the campaign was to help candidate Trump improve relations with Russia. To that end, Page emailed campaign officials offering his thoughts on U.S.-Russian relations, prepared talking points and briefing memos on Russia, and proposed that candidate Trump meet with President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. In communications with campaign officials, Page also repeatedly touted his high-level contacts in Russia and his ability to forge connections between candidate Trump and senior Russian governmental officials. For example, on January 30, 2016, Page sent an email to senior campaign officials stating that he had, quote, spent the past week in Europe and had been in discussions with some individuals with close ties to Kremlin who recognized that Trump could have a game-changing effect in bringing the end of the new Cold War. The email stated that in Moscow, through his discussions with these high-level contacts, Page believed that a direct meeting in Moscow between Trump and Putin could be arranged. Page closed the email, criticizing U.S. sanctions on Russia. Oh, that's me. On March 21st, 2016, candidate Trump formally and publicly identified Page as a member of his foreign policy team to advise on Russia and the energy sector. Over the next several months, Page continued providing policy-related work product to campaign officials. For candidate For example, in April 2016, Page provided feedback on an outline for a foreign policy speech that the candidate gave at the Mayflower Hotel. In May 2016, Page prepared an outline of an energy policy speech for the campaign and then traveled to Bismarck, North Dakota to watch the candidate deliver the speech. Y'all. Chief Policy Advisor Sam Clovis expressed appreciation for Page's work and praised his work to the other campaign officials.
Section C, Carter Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow. Page's affiliation with the Trump campaign took on a higher profile and drew the attention of Russian officials after the candidate named him a foreign policy advisor. As a result, in late April 2016, Page was invited to give a speech at the July 2016 commencement ceremony at the new economic school, NES, in Moscow. The NES commencement ceremony generally featured high-profile speakers. For example, President Barack Obama delivered a commencement address at the school in 2009. NES officials told the office that the interest in inviting Page to speak at NES was based entirely on his status as a Trump campaign advisor who served as the candidate's Russia expert. Andrei Krikovic, an associate of Page's and an assistant professor at the Higher School of Economics in Russia, recommended that NES Sector Shlomo, that's a real name, Weber invite Page to give the commencement address based on his connection to the Trump campaign. Denis Clementyov, an employee of NES, and said that when Russians learned of Page's involvement in the Trump campaign in March 2016, the excitement was palpable. Weber recalled that in summer 2016, there was substantial interest in the Trump campaign in Moscow, and he felt that bringing a member of the campaign to the school would be beneficial. Page was eager to accept the invitation to speak at NES, and he sought approval from Trump campaign officials to make the trip to Russia. On May 16, 2016, while the request was still under consideration, Page emailed Clovis, J.D. Gordon, and Wally Furs, and suggested that candidate Trump take his place speaking at the commencement ceremony in Moscow. On June 19, 2016, Page followed up again to request approval to speak at the NES event and to reiterate that NES would love to have Mr. Trump speak at this annual celebration in Page's place. Campaign manager Corey Lewandowski responded the same day saying, "If you want to do this, it would be outside of your role with the DJT for president campaign. I'm certain Mr. Trump will not be able to attend."
In early July 2016, Page traveled to Russia for the NES events. On July 5, 2016, Denis Klementov, copying his brother Dmitry Klementov, emailed Maria Zakharova, the director of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Information and Press Department, about Page's visit and his connection to the Trump campaign. Denis Klementov said in the email that he wanted to draw the Russian government's attention to Page's visit to Moscow. His message to Zakharova continued, quote, "Page is Trump's advisor on foreign policy. He is a known businessman. He used to work in Russia. If you have any questions, I will be happy to help contact him." Dmitry Klementov then contacted Russian Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov about Page's visit to see if Peskov wanted to introduce Page to any Russian government officials. The following day, Peskov responded to what appears to have been the same Denis Klementov-Zakharova email thread. Peskov wrote, quote, "I have read about Page. Specialists say that he is far from being the main one, so I better not initiate a meeting in the Kremlin," end quote.
On July 7, 2016, Page delivered the first of his 2 speeches in Moscow at NES. In the speech, Page criticized the U.S. government's foreign policy toward Russia, stating that, quote, "Washington and other Western capitals have impeded potential progress through their often hypocritical focus on ideas such as democratization, inequality, corruption, and regime change." I'm going to just briefly reiterate that they impeded progress. On July 8, 2016, Page delivered a speech during the NES commencement. After Page delivered his commencement address, Russian Deputy Prime Minister and NES board member Arkady Dvorkovich spoke at the ceremony and stated that the sanctions the United States had imposed on Russia had hurt the NES. Page and Dvorkovich shook hands at the commencement ceremony, and Weber recalled that Dvorkovich made statements to Page about working together in the future. Redacted. Page said that during his time in Moscow, he met with friends and associates he knew from when he lived in Russia, including Andrei Baranov, a former Gazprom employee who had become the head of investor relations at Rosneft, a Russian energy company. Page stated that he and Baranov talked about, quote, immaterial, non-public, end quote, information. Page believed he and Baranov discussed Rosneft president Igor Sechin, and he thought Baranov might have mentioned the possibility of a sale of a stake in Rosneft in passing. Page recalled mentioning his involvement in the Trump campaign with Baranov, although he did not remember details of the conversation. Page also met with individuals from Tatneft, a Russian energy company, to discuss possible business deals, including having Page work as a consultant.
On July 8, 2016, while he was in Moscow, Page emailed several campaign officials and stated he would send, quote, a readout soon regarding some incredible insights and outreach I received from a few Russian legislators and senior members of the presidential administration here, end quote. On July 9, 2016, Page emailed Clovis, writing in pertinent part,
Russian Deputy Prime Minister and NES board member Arkady Dvorkovich also spoke before the event. In a private conversation, Dvorkovich expressed strong support for Mr. Trump and a desire to work together toward devising better solutions in response to the vast range of current international problems. Based on feedback from a diverse array of other sources close to the presidential administration, it was readily apparent that this sentiment is widely held at all levels of government.
despite these representations to the campaign, big, long redaction. The office was unable to obtain additional evidence or testimony about who Page may have met or communicated with in Moscow. Thus, Page's activities in Russia, as described in his emails with the campaign, were not fully explained.
Just gonna answer that phone real fast.
Probably that's some sort of CIA operation.
Yes, definitely. They've infiltrated.
CIA is calling me.
D. Later campaign work and removal from the campaign. In July 2016, after returning from Russia, Page traveled to the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. While there, Page met Russian ambassador to the United States, Sergei Kislyak. Got it? Page later emailed campaign officials with feedback he said he received from ambassadors he had met at the convention. And he wrote that Ambassador Kislyak was very worried about candidate Clinton's world views. Redacted. Following the convention, Page's trip to Moscow and his advocacy for pro-Russian foreign policy drew the media's attention and began to generate substantial press coverage. The campaign responded by distancing itself from Page, describing him as an informal foreign policy advisor who, quote, did not speak for Mr. Trump or the campaign. On September 23, 2016, Yahoo News reported that U.S. intelligence officials were investigating whether Page had opened private communications with senior Russian officials to discuss U.S. sanctions policy under a possible Trump administration. A campaign spokesman told Yahoo News that Page had no role in the campaign and that the campaign was not aware of any of his activities, past or present. Footnote 589. Michael Isikoff, U.S. intel officials probe ties between Trump advisor and Kremlin. Yahoo News, September 23, 2016. See also 9/25/16 email Hicks to Conway and Bannon, instructing that inquiries about Page should be answered with, he was announced as an informal advisor in March. Since then, he has had no role or official contact with the campaign. We have no knowledge of activities past or present, and he now officially has been removed from all lists, etc. On
September 24th, 2016, Page was formally removed from the campaign.
Although Page had been removed from the campaign, after the election he sought a position in the Trump administration. On November 14, 2016, he submitted an application to the transition team that inflated his credentials and experiences, stating that in his capacity as a Trump campaign foreign policy advisor, he had met with top world leaders and effectively responded to diplomatic outreach efforts from senior government officials in Asia, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas. Page received no response from the transition team. When Page took a personal trip to Moscow in December 2016, he met again with at least one Russian government official. That interaction and discussion of the December trip are set forth in Volume 1, Section 4, Subsection B, Subsection 6.
Dmitry Simas and the Center for National Interest. Members of the Trump campaign interacted on several occasions with the Center for the National Interest, CNI, principally through its president and chief executive officer, oh my God, total drunk girl, officer Dmitry, CNI is a think tank with expertise in and connections to the Russian government. Symes hosted by the, Symes 2016, he was a candidate. Candidate Trump delivered his first speech on foreign policy and national security at an event hosted by the National Interest, a publication affiliated with CNN. Then Senator Jeff Sessions and other contacts with CNI during the campaign period on foreign policy matters, including Russia. Jared Kushner also interacted with them. Investigation did not identify evidence that the campaign passed or received any messages from the Russian government through CNI.
Section A, CNI and Dmitry Symes connect with the Trump campaign. CNI is a Washington-based nonprofit organization that grew out of a center founded by former President Richard Nixon. CNI describes itself as a voice for strategic realism in U.S. foreign policy and publishes a bi-monthly foreign policy magazine, The National Interest. CNI is overseen by a board of directors and an advisory council that is largely honorary and whose members at the relevant time included Sessions, who served as an advisor to candidate Trump on national security and foreign policy issues. Dmitry Symes is president and CEO of CNI and the publisher and CEO of the National Interest. Symes was born in the former Soviet Union, emigrated to the United States in the early 1970s, and joined CNI's predecessor after working at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Symes personally has many contacts with current and former Russian government officials, as does CNI collectively. As CNI stated when seeking a grant from the Carnegie Corporation in 2015, CNI has unparalleled access to Russian officials and politicians among Washington think tanks, in part because CNI has arranged for U.S. delegations to visit Russia and for Russian delegations to visit the United States as part of so-called Track 2 diplomatic efforts.
On March 14, 2016, CNI board member Richard Plepler organized a luncheon for CNI and its honorary chairman, Henry Kissinger, at the Time Warner Building in New York. The idea behind the event was to generate interest in CNI's work and recruit new board members for CNI. Along with Symes, attendees at the event included Jared Kushner, son-in-law of candidate Trump. Kushner told the office that the event came at a time when the Trump campaign was having trouble securing support from experienced foreign policy professionals and that as a result, he decided to seek Symes' assistance during the March 14th event. Symes and Kushner spoke again on March 24th, 2016, telephone call, 3 days after Trump had publicly named a team of foreign policy advisors that had been put together on short notice. On March 31st, 2016, Symes and Kushner had an in-person, one-on-one meeting in Kushner's New York office. During that meeting, Symes told Kushner that the best way to handle foreign policy issues for the Trump campaign would be to organize an advisory group of experts to meet with candidate Trump and develop a foreign policy approach that was consistent with Trump's voice. Symes believed that Kushner was receptive to that suggestion. Symes also had contact with other individuals associated with the Trump campaign regarding the campaign's foreign policy positions. For example, on June 17, 2016, Symes sent J.D. Gordon an email with a memo to Senator Sessions that we discussed our recent meeting, and asked Gordon to both read it and share it with Sessions. The memorandum proposed building a small and carefully selected group of experts to assist Sessions with the campaign, operating under the assumption that Hillary Clinton is very vulnerable on national security and foreign policy issues. The memorandum outlined key issues for the campaign, including a new beginning with Russia.
Section B. National Interest hosts a foreign policy speech at the Mayflower Hotel. During both their March 24th phone call and their March 31st in-person meeting, Symes and Kushner discussed the possibility of CNI hosting a foreign policy speech by candidate Trump. Following those conversations, Symes agreed that he and others associated with CNI would provide behind-the-scenes input on the substance of the foreign policy speech, and that CNI officials would coordinate the logistics of the speech with Sessions and his staff, including Sessions' Chief of Staff, Rick Dearborn. In mid-April 2016, Kushner put Symes in contact with senior policy advisor Stephen Miller and forwarded to Symes an outline of the foreign policy speech that Miller had prepared. Symes sent back to the campaign bullet points with ideas for the speech that he drafted with CNI Executive Director Paul Saunders and board member Richard Berg. Symes received subsequent draft outlines from Miller, and he and Saunders spoke to Miller by phone about substantive changes to the speech. It is not clear, however, whether CNI officials received an actual draft of the speech for comment. While Saunders recalled having received an actual draft, Symes did not, and the emails that CNI produced to this office did not contain such a draft.
After board members expressed concern to Symes that CNI's hosting the speech could be perceived as an endorsement of a particular candidate, CNI decided to have its publication, The National Interest, serve as the host and to have the event at the National Press Club. Kushner later requested that the event be moved to the Mayflower Hotel, which was another venue that Symes had mentioned during initial discussions with the campaign, in order to address concerns about security as well as capacity. On April 25, 2016, Saunders booked event rooms at the Mayflower to host both the speech and a VIP reception that was to be held beforehand. Saunders understood that the reception, at which invitees would have the chance to meet candidate Trump, would be a small event. Saunders decided who would attend by looking at the list of CNI's invitees to the speech itself, and then choosing a subset for the reception. CNI's invitees to the reception included Sessions and Kislyak. The week before the speech, Symes had informed Kislyak that he would be invited to the speech and that he would have the opportunity to meet Trump.
When the pre-speech reception began on April 27th, the receiving line was quickly organized so that attendees could meet Trump. Sessions first stood next to Trump to introduce him to the members of Congress who were in attendance. After those members had been introduced, Symes stood next to Trump and introduced him to the CNI invitees in attendance, including Kislyak. Symes perceived the introduction to be positive and friendly, but thought it clear that Kislyak and Trump had just met for the first time. Kislyak also met Kushner during the free speech reception. The two shook hands and chatted for a minute or two, during which Kushner recalled Kislyak saying, "We like what your candidate is saying. It's refreshing." Several public reports state that in addition to speaking to Kushner at the free speech reception, Kislyak also met or conversed with Sessions at that time. Sessions stated to investigators, however, that he did not remember any such conversation, nor did anyone else affiliated with CNI or the national interests specifically recall a conversation or meeting between Sessions and Kislyak at the pre-speech reception. It appears that if a conversation occurred at the pre-speech reception, it was a brief one conducted in public view, similar to the exchange between Kushner and Kislyak. The office found no evidence that Kislyak conversed with either Trump or Sessions after the speech, or would have had the opportunity to do so. Symes, for example, did not recall seeing Kislyak at the post-speech luncheon, and the only witness who accounted for Sessions' whereabouts stated that Sessions may have spoken to the press after the event, but then departed for Capitol Hill. Saunders recalled, based in part on a food-related request he received from a campaign staff member, that Trump left the hotel a few minutes after the speech to go to the airport.
Section C. Jeff Sessions' post-speech interactions with CNI. In the wake of Sessions' confirmation hearings as Attorney General, questions arose about whether Sessions' campaign period interactions with CNI, apart from the Mayflower speech, included any additional meetings with Ambassador Kislyak or involved Russian-related matters. With respect to Kislyak contacts, on May 23, 2016, Sessions attended CNI's Distinguished Service Award dinner at the Four Seasons Hotel in Washington, D.C. Sessions attended a pre-dinner reception and was seated at one of two head tables for the event. A seating chart prepared by Saunders indicates that Sessions was scheduled to be seated next to Kislyak, who appears to have responded to the invitation by indicating he would attend the event. Sessions, however, did not remember seeing, speaking with, or sitting next to Kislyak at the dinner. Although CNI board member Charles Boyd said he may have seen Kislyak at the dinner, Symes, Saunders, and Jacob Huddlebrun, editor of the National Interest, all had no recollection of seeing Kislyak at the May 23rd event. Kislyak also does not appear in any of the photos from the event that the office obtained. In the summer of 2016, CNI organized at least 2 dinners in Washington, D.C. for Sessions to meet with experienced foreign policy professionals. The dinners included CNI-affiliated individuals such as Richard Burke, Zalmay Khalilzad, a former U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan and Iraq, and the person who had introduced Trump before the April 27, 2016 foreign policy speech. Khalilzad also met with Sessions one-on-one, separately from the dinners. At the dinners and in the meetings, the participants addressed U.S. relations with Russia, including how U.S. relations with NATO and European countries affected U.S. policy towards Russia. But the discussions were not exclusively focused on Russia. Khalilzad, for example, recalled discussing nation building and violent extremism with Sessions. In addition, Sessions asked Saunders of CNI to draft 2 memoranda not specific to Russia, one on Hillary Clinton's foreign policy shortcomings and another on Egypt.
D. Jared Kushner's continuing contacts with Symes. Between the April 2016 speech at the Mayflower Hotel and the presidential election, Jared Kushner had periodic contacts with Symes. Those contacts consisted of both in-person meetings and phone conversations, which concerned how to address issues relating to Russia in the campaign and how to move forward with the advisory group of foreign policy experts that Symes had proposed. Symes recalled that he, not Kushner, initiated all conversations about Russia and that Kushner never asked him to set up back-channel conversations with Russians.
Never.
According to Symes, after the Mayflower speech in late April, Symes raised the issue of Russian contacts with Kushner, advised that it was bad optics for the campaign to develop hidden Russian contacts, and told Kushner both that the campaign should not highlight Russia as an issue and should handle any contacts with Russians with care.
Never.
Footnote, Symes 3818, 302 at 27. During this period of time, the campaign received a request for a high-level campaign official to meet with an officer at a Russian state-owned bank to discuss an offer that officer claims to be carrying from President Putin to meet with candidate Trump. Copying Manafort and Gates, Kushner responded, "Pass on this. A lot of people come claiming to carry messages. Very few are able to verify. For now, I think we can decline such meetings. Most likely, these people go back home and claim they have special access to gain importance for themselves. Be careful." Kushner generally provided a similar account of his interactions with Symes. Among the Kushner-Symes meetings was one held on August 17, 2016, at Symes' request in Kushner's New York office.
The meeting was to address foreign policy advice that CNI was providing and how to respond to the Clinton campaign's Russia-related attacks on candidate Trump. In advance of the meeting, Symes sent Kushner a Russia policy memo laying out, quote, what Mr. Trump may want to say about Russia, another footnote. The memorandum recommended downplaying Russia as a U.S. foreign policy priority at this time and suggested that some tend to exaggerate Putin's flaws. The memorandum also recommended approaching general Russian-related questions in the framework of how to work with Russia to advance important U.S. national interests, and that a Trump administration not go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. The memorandum did not discuss sanctions, but did address how to handle Ukraine-related questions, including questions about Russia's invasion and annexation of Crimea. In a cover email transmitting that memo and a phone call to set up the meeting, Symes mentioned a well-documented story of highly questionable connections between Bill Clinton and the Russian government, parts of which, according to Symes, had even been discussed with the CIA and the FBI in the late 1990s and shared with the Independent Counsel at the end of the Clinton presidency. Kushner forwarded the email to senior Trump campaign officials, Stephen Miller, Paul Manafort, and Rick Gates, with a note, suggestion only. Manafort subsequently forwarded the email to his assistant and scheduled a meeting with Symes. Manafort was on the verge of leaving the campaign by the time of the scheduled meeting with Symes, and Symes ended up meeting only with Kushner.
During the August 17th meeting, Symes provided Kushner the Clinton-related information that he had promised. Symes told Kushner that, redacted, Symes claimed that he had received this information from former CIA and Reagan White House official Fritz Ermath, who claimed to have learned it from U.S. intelligence sources, not from Russians. Symes perceived that Kushner did not find the information to be of interest or use to the campaign because it was, in Symes' words, old news. When interviewed by the office, Kushner stated that he believed that there was little chance of something new being revealed about the Clintons given their long career as public figures, and that he never received from Symes information that could be operationalized for the Trump campaign. Despite Kushner's reaction, Symes believed that he provided the same information at a small group meeting of foreign policy experts that CNI organized for Sessions.
June 9th, 2016, meeting at Trump Tower. On June 9th, 2016, senior representatives of the Trump campaign met in Trump Tower with a Russian attorney expecting to receive derogatory information about Hillary Clinton from the Russian government. The meeting was proposed to Donald Trump Jr. in an email from Robert Goldstone at the request of his then client, Emin Agalarov, the son of Russian real estate developer Aras Agalarov. Goldstone relayed to Trump Jr. that the, quote, Crown Prosecutor of Russia offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia, end quote, as, open quote, part of Russia with its government support for Mr. Trump, end quote. Trump Jr. immediately responded that, if it's what you say, I love it, and arranged the meeting through a series of emails and telephone calls. Trump Jr. invited campaign chairman Paul Manafort and senior advisor Jared Kushner to attend the meeting, and both attended. Members of the campaign discussed the meeting before it occurred, and Michael Cohen recalled that Trump Jr. may have told candidate Trump about an upcoming meeting to receive adverse information about Clinton, without linking the meeting to Russia. According to written answers submitted by President Trump, he had no recollection of learning of the meeting at the time, and the office found no documentary evidence showing that he was made aware of the meeting or its Russia connections before it occurred. The Russian attorney who spoke at the meeting, Natalia Veselnitskaya, had previously worked for the Russian government and maintained a relationship with the government throughout this period of time. She claimed that funds derived from illegal activities in Russia were provided to Hillary Clinton and other Democrats. Trump Jr. requested evidence to support those claims, but Veselnitskaya did not provide such information. She and her associates then turned to a critique of the origins of the Magnitsky Act, a 2012 statute that imposed financial and travel sanctions on Russian officials and that had resulted in a retaliatory ban on adoptions of Russian children. Trump Jr. suggested that the issue could be revisited when and if candidate Trump was elected. After the election, Zelenskaya made additional efforts to follow up on the meeting, but the Trump transition team did not engage.
Section A, setting up the June 9th meeting. Subsection 1, outreach to Donald Trump Jr. Aris Agalarov is a Russian real estate developer with ties to Putin and other members of the Russian government, including Russia's Prosecutor General, Yuri Chaika. Aris Agalarov is the president of the Crocus Group, a Russian enterprise that holds substantial Russian government construction contracts, and that worked with Trump in connection with the 2013 Miss Universe pageant in Moscow and a potential Trump-Moscow real estate project. The relationship continued over time as the parties pursued the Trump-Moscow project in 2013 through 14 and exchanged gifts and letters in 2016. For example, in April 2016, Trump responded to a letter from Aris with a handwritten note. Aris expressed interest in Trump's campaign, passed on, quote, congratulations for winning in the primary, and, according to one email drafted by Goldstone, an offer of his, quote, support and that of many of his important Russian friends and colleagues, especially with reference to U.S.-Russian relations, end quote. On June 3, 2016, Emin Agalarov called Goldstone, Emin's then publicist. Goldstone is a music and events promoter who represented Emin from approximately late 2012 through 2016. While representing Emin, Goldstone facilitated the ongoing contact between the Trumps and the Agalarovs, including an invitation that Trump sent to Putin to attend the 2013 Miss Universe pageant in Moscow. Redacted. Goldstone understood, redacted, a Russian political connection, and Emin Agalarov indicated that the attorney was a prosecutor. Goldstone recalled that the information that might interest the Trumps involved Hillary Clinton.
A what?
Redacted. Redacted. And further redaction.
The redacted mentioned by Emin Agalarov was Natalia Veselnitskaya. Was Natalia Veselnitskaya. From approximately 1998 until 2001, Veselnitskaya worked as a prosecutor for the Central Administrative District of the Russian Prosecutor's Office, and she continued to perform government-related work and maintain ties to the Russian government following her departure. She lobbied and testified about the Magnitsky Act, which imposed financial sanctions and travel restrictions on Russian officials, and which was named for a Russian tax specialist who exposed a fraud and later died in a Russian prison. Putin called the statute a purely political, unfriendly act, and Russia responded by barring a list of current and former U.S. officials from entering Russia and by halting the adoption of Russian children by U.S. citizens. Veselnitskaya performed legal work for Denis Katsin, the son of Russian businessman Peter Katsin, and for his company Previzon Holdings Limited, which was a defendant in a civil forfeiture action alleging the laundering of proceeds from the fraud exposed by Magnitsky. Going back to and later died in a Russian prison, there's a footnote. 676. In December 2018, a grand jury in the Southern District of New York returned an indictment charging Veselnitskaya with obstructing the Previzon litigation discussed in the text above. The indictment alleges, among other things, that Veselnitskaya lied to the district court about her relationship to the Russian Prosecutor General's office and her involvement in responding to a U.S. document request sent to the Russian government. She also appears to have been involved in an April 2016 approach to a U.S. congressional delegation in Moscow offering confidential information, quote, from the Prosecutor General of Russia about interactions between certain political forces in our two countries. Shortly after his June 3rd call with Emin Agalarov, Goldstone emailed Trump Jr. The email stated,
Good morning. Me just called and asked me to contact you with something very interesting. The Crown Prosecutor of Russia met with his father, Aris, this morning, and in their meeting offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary in her dealings with Russia and would be very useful to your father. This is obviously very high-level and sensitive information, but it's part of Russia and its government support for Mr. Trump, helped along by Aris and Emin. What do you think is the best way to handle this information, and would you be able to speak to Emin about it directly? I can also send this information to your father via Rona, but it's also ultra-sensitive, so I wanted to send it to you first. Best, Rob Goldstone.
Within minutes of this email, Trump Jr. responded, emailing back, "Thanks, Rob, I appreciate that. I'm on the road at the moment, but perhaps I just speak to Emin first. Seems we have some time, and if it's what you say, I love it, especially later in the summer. Could we do a call first thing next week when I am back?" Goldstone conveyed Trump Jr.'s interest to Emin, emailing that Trump Jr., quote, "wants to speak personally on the issue." On June 6, 2016, Emin asked Goldstone if there was any news, and Goldstone explained that Trump Jr. was likely still traveling for the final elections, where Trump will be crowned the official nominee. On the same day, Goldstone again emailed Trump Jr. and asked when Trump Jr. was, quote, "free to talk with Emin about Hillary info," end quote. Trump Jr. asked if they could speak now, and Goldstone arranged a call between Trump Jr. and Emin. On June 6th and June 7th, Trump Jr. and Emin had multiple brief calls. Also on June 6, 2016, Aris called the Kavaldas and asked him to attend a meeting in New York, the Trump Organization. Kavaladze is a Georgian-born naturalized U.S. citizen who worked in the United States for the Caucus Group and reported to Aris Agalarov. Kavaladze told the office that in a second phone call on June 6, 2016, Aris Agalarov asked Kavaladze, if he knew anything about the Magnitsky Act, and Aris sent him a short synopsis for the meeting with Velenitskaya's business card. According to Kavaladze, Aris Agalarov said the purpose of the meeting was to discuss the Magnitsky Act, and he asked Kavaladze to translate.
On June 7th, Goldstone emailed Trump Jr. and said that Emin asked that I schedule a meeting with you and the Russian government's attorney who is flying over from Moscow. Trump Jr. replied that Manafort identified as the campaign boss, Jared Kushner, and Trump Jr. would likely attend. Goldstone was surprised to learn that Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Trump would attend. Kavaladze, puzzled by the Manafort and Kushner, by the list of attendees, and that he checked with one of the assistants, Roman Ben Miamano, who said the purpose of the meeting was for Velenitskaya to convey negative information on Hillary Clinton. That dude was like, yeah.
Early on June 8, 2016, Kushner emailed his assistant asking her to discuss a 3 p.m. meeting the following day with Trump Jr. Later that day, Trump Jr. forwarded the entirety of his email correspondence regarding the meeting with Goldstone to Manafort and Kushner under the subject line forward, Russia, Clinton, private and confidential, adding a note that the meeting got moved to 4 tomorrow at my offices. Kushner then sent his assistant a second email informing her that the meeting with Don Jr. is 4 p.m. now. Manafort responded, "See you then." Rick Gates, who was the deputy campaign chairman, stated during interviews with the office that in the days before June 9, 2016, Trump Jr. announced at a regular morning meeting of senior campaign staff and Trump family members that he had a lead on negative information about the Clinton Foundation. Gates believed that Trump Jr. said the information was coming from a group in Kyrgyzstan and that he was introduced to the group by a friend. Gates recalled that the meeting was attended by Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Paul Manafort, Hope Hicks, and joining late, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. According to Gates, Manafort warned the group that the meeting likely would not yield vital information and they should be careful. Hicks denied any knowledge of the June 9th meeting before 2017, and Kushner did not recall if a planned June 9th meeting came up at all earlier that week. Michael Cohen recalled being in Donald J. Trump's office on June 6th or 7th when Trump Jr. told his father that a meeting to obtain adverse information about Clinton was going forward. Cohen did not recall Trump Jr. stating that the meeting was connected to Russia. From the tenor of the conversation, Cohen believed that Trump Jr. had previously discussed the meeting with his father, although Cohen was not involved in any such conversation. In an interview with the Senate Judiciary Committee, however, Trump Jr. stated that he did not inform his father about the emails or the upcoming meeting. Similarly, neither Manafort nor Kushner recalled anyone informing candidate Trump of the meeting, including Trump Jr. President Trump has stated to this office in written answers to questions, that he has no recollection of learning at the time that his son, Manafort, or Kushner was considering participating in a meeting in June 2016 concerning potentially negative information about Hillary Clinton.
Section B, the events of June 9th, 2016. Subsection 1, arrangements for the meetings. Veselnitskaya was in New York on June 9th, 2016 for appellate proceedings in the Provozon civil forfeiture litigation. That day, Veselnitskaya called Renat Hakhmetshin, a Soviet-born U.S. lobbyist, redacted, and when she learned that he was in New York, invited him to lunch. Akhmetshin told the office that he had worked on issues relating to the Magnitsky Act and had worked on the Provozon litigation. Kavaladze and Anatoly Samarchonov, a Russian-born translator who had assisted Veselnitskaya with Magnitsky-related lobbying in the Provozon case, also attended the lunch. Redacted. Veselnitskaya said she was meeting, redacted, and asked Akhmetshin what she should tell him. According to several participants in the lunch, Veselnitskaya showed Akhmetshin a document alleging financial misconduct by Bill Browder and the Zip brothers, open parenthetical, Americans with business in Russia, in parenthetical, and those individuals subsequently making political donations to the DNC, redacted.
The group then went to the Trump Tower for the meeting.
Sorry about that.
So they leave lunch to go to the Trump Tower meeting. Subsection 2, conduct of the meeting. Trump Jr., Manafort, and Kushner participated on the Trump side, while Kavaladze, Samachanov, Akhmetshin, and Goldstone attended with Veselnitskaya. The office spoke to every participant except Veselnitskaya and Trump Jr., the latter of whom declined to be voluntarily interviewed by the office. Redacted. The meeting lasted approximately 20 minutes. Redacted. Goldstone recalled that Trump Jr. invited Veselnitskaya to begin, but did not say anything about the subject of the meeting. Participants agreed that Veselnitskaya stated that the Zip brothers had broken Russian law and had donated their profits to the DNC or the Clinton campaign. She asserted that the Zip brothers had engaged in tax evasion and money laundering in both the United States and Russia. Redacted, yet again. According to Akhmetshin, Trump Jr. asked follow-up questions about how the alleged payments could be tied specifically to the Clinton campaign, but Veselnitskaya indicated that she could not trace the money and wants that entered the United States. Kavaladze similarly recalled that Trump Jr. asked what they have on Clinton, and Kushner became agitated and asked, quote, "What are we doing here?" Akhmedov then spoke about U.S. sanctions imposed under the Magnitsky Act and Russia's response prohibiting U.S. adoption of Russian children. Several participants recalled that Trump Jr. commented that Trump is a private citizen and there was nothing they could do at that time. Trump Jr. also said that they could revisit the issue if and when they were in government. Notes that Manafort took on his phone reflect the general flow of the conversation, although not all of its details. Footnote 734. Manafort's notes state, Bill Browder, offshore-Cyprus.
Offshore?
133M shares. Companies. Not invest-loan. Value in Cyprus as Inter. Illicit. Active sponsors of RNC. Browder hired Joanna Glover. Tied into Cheney. Russian adoption by American families.
At some point in the meeting, Kushner sent an iMessage to Manafort stating, quote, waste of time, followed immediately by 2 separate emails to assistants at Kushner companies with requests that they call him to give him an excuse to leave. Samakornov recalled that Kushner departed the meeting before it concluded, presumably getting a message to leave. Veselnitskaya recalled the same when interviewed by the press in July 2017. Veselnitskaya's press interviews and written statements to Congress differ materially from other accounts. In a July 2017 press interview, Veselnitskaya claimed that she has no connection to the Russian government and had not referred to any derogatory information concerning the Clinton campaign when she met with Trump campaign officials. Veselnitskaya's November 2017 written submission to the Senate Judiciary Committee stated that the purpose of the June 9th meeting was not to connect with the Trump campaign, but rather to have, quote, a private meeting with Donald Trump Jr., a friend of my good acquaintance's son, on the matter of assisting me or my colleagues in informing the Congress members as to the criminal nature of manipulation and interference with the legislative activities of the U.S. Congress. In other words, Veselnitskaya claimed her focus was on Congress and not the campaign. No witness, however, recalled any reference to Congress during the meeting. Veselnitskaya also maintained that she, quote, attended the meeting as a lawyer of Denis Katsev, end quote, the previously mentioned owner of Previzon Holdings, but she did not introduce herself in this capacity.
In the July 2017 television interview, Trump Jr. stated that while he had no way to gauge the reliability, credibility, or accuracy of what Goldstone had stated was the purpose of the meeting, if someone has information on our opponent, maybe this is something. I should hear them out. Trump Jr. further stated in September 2017 congressional testimony that he thought he should, quote, listen to what Rob and his colleagues had to say. Depending on what, if any, information was provided, Trump Jr. stated he could then consult with counsel to make an informed decision as to whether to give it any further consideration. After the June 9th meeting concluded, Goldstone apologized to Trump Jr. According to Goldstone, he told Trump Jr., redacted, and told Amin Agalarov in a phone call that the meeting was about adoption, redacted. R.S. Agalarov asked Kavaladze to report in after the meeting, but before Kavaladze could call, R.S. Agalarov called him. With Veselnitskaya next to him, Kavaladze reported that the meeting had gone well, but he later told R.S. Agalarov that the meeting was about Magnitsky Act. The Magnitsky Act had been a waste of time because it was not with lawyers and they were preaching to the wrong crowd.
Footnote, redacted. On June 14, 2016, Kavaladze's teenage daughter emailed asking how the June 9th meeting had gone, and Kavaladze responded, meeting was boring. The Russians did not have any of the bad info on Hillary. Section C, post-June 9 events. Veselnitskaya and R.S. Agalarov made at least 2 unsuccessful attempts after the election to meet with Trump representatives to convey similar information about Browder and the Magnitsky Act. On November 23, 2016, Kaveladze emailed Goldstone about setting up another meeting with Tea People and sent a document bearing allegations similar to those conveyed on June 9th. Kaveladze followed up with Goldstone stating that Mr. A, which Goldstone understood to mean Aris Agalarov, called to ask about the meeting. Goldstone emailed the document to Rona Graf, saying that Aris Agalarov has asked me to pass on this document in the hope it can be passed on to the appropriate team. If needed, a lawyer representing the case is in New York currently and happy to meet with any member of his transition team, end quote. According to Goldstone, around January 2017, Kaveladze contacted him again to set up another meeting, but Goldstone did not make the request. The investigation did not identify evidence of the transition team following up. Participants in the June 9, 2016 meeting began receiving inquiries from attorneys representing the Trump Organization, starting in approximately June 2017. On approximately June 2nd, 2017, Goldstone spoke with Alan Gartman, General Counsel of the Trump Organization, about his participation in the June 9th meeting. The same day, Goldstone emailed Valenskaya's name to Gartman, identifying her as, quote, woman who was the attorney who spoke at the meeting from Moscow, end quote. Later in June 2017, Goldstone participated in a lengthier call with Garden and Alan Futerfas, outside counsel for the Trump Organization and subsequently personal counsel for Trump Jr. On June 27, 2017, Goldstone emailed Eamon Agalarov with the subject, quote, Trump attorneys, end quote, and stated that he was, quote, interviewed by attorneys, end quote, about the June 9th meeting who were, quote, concerned about its links to John Jr. to officials from Russia, which he has always denied meeting, end quote. Goldstone stressed that he, quote, did say at the time this was an awful idea and a terrible meeting, end quote. Eamon Agalarov sent a screenshot of the message to Kaveladze.
The June 9th meeting became public in July 2017. In a July 9th, 2017 text message to Eamon Agalarov, Goldstone wrote, I made sure I kept you and your father out of this story. And if contacted, I can do a dance and keep you out of it. Goldstone added, FBI now investigating, and I hope this favor was worth for your dad. It could blow up. On July 12, 2017, Eamon Agalarov complained to Kaveladze that his father Aris never listens to him and that their relationship with Mr. T has been thrown down the drain. The next month, Goldstone commented to Eamon about the volume of publicity the June 9th meeting had generated, stating that his reputation was basically destroyed by this dumb meeting, which your father insisted on, even though Ike and me told him it would be bad news and not to do it. Goldstone added, I am not able to respond out of courtesy to you and your father, and painted as some mysterious link to Putin. After public reporting on the June 9th meeting began, representatives from the Trump Organization again reached out to participants. On July 10th, 2017, Futerfas sent Goldstone an email with a proposed statement for Goldstone to issue, which read,
As the person who arranged the meeting, I can definitively state that the statements I have read by Donald Trump Jr. are 100% accurate. The meeting was a complete waste of time, and Don was never told Ms. Vaselinskaya's name prior to the meeting. Ms. Vaselinskaya mostly talked about the Magnitsky Act and the Russian adoption laws, and the meeting lasted 20 to 30 minutes at the most. There was never any follow-up, and nothing ever came of the meeting.
Redacted. The statement drafted by Trump Organization representatives was redacted. He proposed a different statement, asserting that he had been asked by his client in Moscow, Eamon Agalarov, to facilitate a meeting between a Russian attorney, Natalia Veselnitskaya, and Donald Trump Jr. The lawyer had apparently stated that she had some information regarding funding to the DNC from Russia, which she believed Mr. Trump Jr. might find interesting. Goldstone never released either statement.
On the Russian end, there was also communications about what participants should say about the June 9th meeting. Specifically, the organization that hired Samar Kornov, an anti-Magnitsky Act group controlled by Vaselinskaya and the owner of Prevazon, offered to pay $90,000 of Samar Kornov's legal fees. At Veselnitskaya's request, the organization sent Samarkandov a transcript of a Veselnitskaya press interview, and Samarkandov understood that the organization would pay his legal fees only if he made statements consistent with Veselnitskaya's. Samarkandov declined, telling the office that he did not want to perjure himself. The individual who conveyed Veselnitskaya's request to Samarkandov stated that he did not expressly condition payment on following Veselnitskaya's answers, but in hindsight recognized that by sending the transcript, Samarkandov could have interpreted the offer of assistance to be conditioned on his not contradicting Veselnitskaya's account. Volume 2 discusses interactions between President Trump, Trump Jr., and others in June and July 2017 regarding the June 9th meeting.
Republican National Convention. Trump campaign officials met with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak during the week of the Republican National Convention. The evidence indicates that those interactions were brief and non-substantial. During platform committee meetings immediately before the convention, J.D. Gordon, the senior campaign advisor on policy and national security, diluted a proposed amendment to the Republican Party platform, expressing support for providing, quote, lethal assistance to Ukraine in response to Russian aggression. Gordon requested that platform committee personnel revise the proposed amendment to state that only, quote, appropriate assistance be provided to Ukraine. The original sponsor of the, quote, lethal assistance amendment stated that Gordon told her, the sponsor, that he was on the phone with candidate Trump in connection with this request to dilute the language. Gordon denied making that statement to the sponsor, although he acknowledged it was possible he mentioned having previously spoken to the candidate about the subject matter. The investigation did not establish that Gordon spoke to or was directed by the candidate to make that proposal. Gordon said that he sought the change because he believed the proposed language was inconsistent with Trump's position on Ukraine.
Section A. Ambassador Kislyak's encounters with Senator Sessions and J.D. Gordon the week of the RNC. Hold on just a second, this microphone is not tight. There we go. In July 2016, Senator Sessions and Gordon spoke at the Global Partners in Diplomacy event, a conference co-sponsored by the State Department and the Heritage Foundation, held in Cleveland, Ohio, the same week as the Republican National Convention, also known as RNC or Convention. Approximately 80 foreign ambassadors to the United States, including Kislyak, were invited to the conference. On July 20th, 2016, Gordon and Sessions delivered their speeches at the conference. In his speech, Gordon stated in pertinent part that the United States should have better relations with Russia. During Sessions' speech, he took questions from the audience, one of which may have been asked by Kislyak. When the speeches concluded, several ambassadors lined up to greet the speakers. Gordon shook hands with Kislyak and reiterated that he had meant what he said in the speech about improving U.S.-Russia relations. Sessions separately spoke with between 6 and 12 ambassadors, including Kislyak. Although Sessions stated during the interviews with the office that he had no specific recollection of what he discussed with Kislyak, he believed that the two spoke for only a few minutes and that they would have exchanged pleasantries and said some things about U.S.-Russia relations. Later that evening, Gordon attended a reception as part of the conference. Gordon ran into Kislyak as the two prepared plates of food, and they decided to sit at the same table to eat. They were joined at that table by the ambassadors from Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, and by Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, who prior to him. As they ate, Gordon and Kislyak talked for what Gordon estimated to have been 3 to 5 minutes, during which Gordon again mentioned that he meant what he said in his speech about improving U.S.-Russia relations.
Section B. Change to Republican Party platform. In preparation for the 2016 convention, foreign policy advisors to the Trump campaign, working with the Republican National Committee, reviewed the 2012 convention's foreign policy platform to identify divergence between the earlier platform and candidate Trump's positions. The campaign team discussed toning down language from the 2012 platform that identified Russia as the country's #1 threat, given the candidate's belief that there needed to be better U.S. relations with Russia. The RNC Platform Committee sent the 2016 draft platform to the National Security and Defense Platform Subcommittee on July 10, 2016, the evening before its first meeting to propose amendments. Although only delegates could participate in formal discussions and vote on the platform, the Trump campaign could request changes, and members of the Trump campaign attended committee meetings. John Mashburn, the campaign's policy director, helped oversee the campaign's involvement in the platform committee meetings. He told the office that he directed campaign staff at the convention, including J.D. Gordon, to take a hands-off approach and only to challenge platform planks if they directly contradicted Trump's wishes.
Everyone still awake? All right. Here we go. On July 11, 2016, Delegate Diane Denman submitted a proposed platform amendment that included provision of armed support for Ukraine. The amendment described Russia's ongoing military aggression in Ukraine and announced support for maintaining and, if warranted, increasing sanctions against Russia until Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity are fully restored, and for providing lethal defensive weapons to Ukraine's armed forces and greater coordination with NATO on defense planning. Gordon reviewed the proposed platform changes, including Denman's. Gordon stated that he flagged this amendment because of Trump's stated position on Ukraine, which Gordon personally heard the candidate say at the March 31st foreign policy meeting, namely that the Europeans should take primary responsibility for any assistance to Ukraine, that there should be improved U.S.-Russia relations, and that he did not want to start World War III over that region. Gordon told the office that Trump's statements on the campaign trail following the March meeting underscored those positions to the point where Gordon felt obliged to object to the proposed platform change and seek its deletion. On July 11, 2016, at a meeting of the National Security and Defense Platform Subcommittee, Denman offered her amendment. Gordon and other campaign staffer Matt Mueller approached the committee co-chair and asked him to table the amendment to permit further discussion. Gordon's concern with the amendment was the language about providing lethal defense weapons to Ukraine. Miller did not have any independent basis to believe that this language contradicted Trump's views and relied on Gordon's recollection of the candidate's views.
According to Denman, she spoke with Gordon and Matt Miller, and they told her that they had to clear the language and that Gordon was, quote, talking to New York. Denman told others that she was asked by the two Trump campaign staffers to strike, quote, lethal defense weapons from the proposal, but she refused. Denman recalled Gordon saying he was on the phone with candidate Trump, but she was skeptical whether that was true. Gordon denied having told Denman that he was on the phone with Trump, although he acknowledged it was possible that he may have mentioned having previously spoken to the candidate about the subject matter. Gordon's phone records reveal a call to Sessions' office in Washington that afternoon, but do not include calls directly to a number associated with Trump. And according to the president's written answers to the office's questions, he does not recall being involved in the change in language of the platform amendment. Gordon stated that he tried to reach Rick Dearborn, senior foreign policy advisor, and Mashburn, the campaign policy director. Gordon stated that he connected with both of them. He could not recall it by phone or in person or by seeing or hair, and appraised them of the language he took issue with in the proposed amendment. Gordon recalled no objection by either Dearborn or Mashburn, and that all three campaign advisors supported the alternative formulation, quote, appropriate assistance. Dearborn recalled Gordon warning them that the amendment would not weigh in because Gordon was more familiar with the campaign's foreign policy stance. Mashburn stated that Gordon reached him, and he told Gordon that Trump had not taken a stance on the issue and that the campaign should not intervene. When the amendment came up again in the committee's proceedings, the subcommittee changed the amendment by striking the, quote, lethal defense weapons language and replacing it with, quote, appropriate assistance. Gordon stated that he and the subcommittee co-chair ultimately agreed to replace the language about armed assistance with appropriate assistance. The subcommittee accordingly approved Denman's amendment, but with the term appropriate assistance. Gordon stated that, to his recollection, this was the only change sought by the campaign. Sam Clovis, the campaign's national co-chair and chief policy advisor, stated he was surprised by the change and did not believe it was in line with Trump's stance. Mashburn stated that when he saw the word appropriate assistance, he believed that Gordon had violated Mashburn's directive not to intervene.
7. Post-convention contacts with Kislyak. Ambassador Kislyak continued his efforts to interact with campaign officials with responsibility for the foreign policy portfolio, among them Sessions and Gordon.
in the weeks after the convention. The office did not identify evidence in those interactions of coordination between the campaign and the Russian government. Section A. Ambassador Kislyak invites J.D. Gordon to breakfast at the ambassador's residence. On August 3rd, 2016, an official from the Embassy of the Russian Federation in the United States wrote to Gordon on behalf of Ambassador Kislyak, inviting Gordon to have breakfast/tea with the ambassador at his residence in Washington, D.C. the following week. Gordon responded 5 days later to decline the invitation. He wrote, "These days are not optimal for us as we are busily knocking down a constant stream of false media stories while also preparing for the first debate with HRC. Hope to take a rain check for another time when things quiet down a bit. Please pass along my regards to the ambassador." The investigation did not identify evidence that Gordon made any other arrangements to meet or met with Kislyak after this email.
B. Senator Sessions' September 2016 meeting with Ambassador Kislyak. Also in August 2016, a representative of the Russian embassy contacted Sessions' Senate office about setting up a meeting with Kislyak. At the time, Sessions was a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and would meet with foreign officials in that capacity. But Sessions' staff reported, and Sessions himself acknowledged, that meeting requests from ambassadors increased substantially in 2016 as Sessions assumed a prominent role in the Trump campaign, and his name was mentioned for potential cabinet-level positions in a future Trump administration.
On September 8, 2016, Sessions met with Kislyak in his Senate office. Sessions said that he believed he was doing the campaign a service by meeting with foreign ambassadors, including Kislyak. He was accompanied in the meeting by at least 2 of his Senate staff, Sandra Luth, his legislative director, and Pete Landrum, who handled military affairs. The meeting lasted less than 30 minutes. Sessions voiced concerns about Russia's sale of a missile defense system to Iran, Russian planes buzzing U.S. military assets in the Middle East, and Russian aggression in emerging democracies such as Ukraine and Moldova. Kislyak offered explanations on these issues and complained about NATO land forces in former Soviet bloc countries that border Russia. Landrum recalled that Kislyak referred to the presidential campaign as, quote, an interesting campaign, end quote. And Sessions also recalled Kislyak saying that the Russian government was receptive to the overtures Trump had laid out during his campaign. None of the attendees, though, remembered any discussion of Russian election interference or any request that Sessions convey information from the Russian government to the Trump campaign. During the meeting, Kislyak invited Sessions to further discuss U.S.-Russia relations with him over a meal at the ambassador's residence. Sessions was non-committal, and Kislyak extended the invitation. After the meeting ended, Luff advised Sessions against accepting the one-on-one meeting with Kislyak, whom she assessed to be, quote, an old-school KGB guy, end quote. Neither Luff nor Landrum recalled that Sessions followed up with the invitation or made any further effort to dine or meet with Kislyak before the November 2016 election. Sessions and Landrum recalled that after the election, some efforts were made to arrange a meeting between Sessions and Kislyak. According to Sessions, the request came through CNI and would have involved a meeting between Sessions and Kislyak, 2 other ambassadors, and the governor of Alabama. That's why not. Sessions, however, was in New York on the day of the anticipated meeting and was unable to attend. The investigation did not identify evidence that the 2 men met at any point after their September 8th meeting.
Home stretch. Last
Fuck Jeff
individual.
Sessions.
Now we're going to talk about Paul Manafort. Section 8, Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort served on the Trump campaign, including a period as campaign chairman, from March to August 2016. Manafort had connections to Russia through his prior work for Russian oligarch Oleg Deripaska, and later through his work for a pro-Russian regime in Ukraine. Manafort stayed in touch with these contacts during the campaign period through Konstantin Kalimnik, a longtime Manafort employee, who previously ran Manafort's office in Kiev, and who the FBI assesses to have ties to Russian intelligence.
After that long footnote, should be read.
Okay. 838? Okay. So, jumping up to Paul Manafort's involvement. On August 21st, 2018, Manafort was convicted in the Eastern District of Virginia on 8 tax, foreign bank account registration, FBAR, and bank fraud charges. On September 14, 2018, Manafort pled guilty in the District of Columbia to 1. Conspiracy to defraud the United States and conspiracy to commit offenses against the United States, parenthetical, money laundering, tax fraud, FBAR, Foreign Agent Registration Act, and FARA false statements, end parenthetical, and 2. Conspiracy to obstruct justice, parenthetical, witness tampering, end parenthetical. Manafort also admitted criminal conduct with which he had been charged in the Eastern District of Virginia, but as to which the jury hung. The conduct at issue in both cases involved Manafort's work in Ukraine and the money he earned for that work, as well as crimes after the Ukraine work ended. On March 7, 2019, Manafort was sentenced to 47 months of imprisonment in the Virginia prosecution. On March 13th, the District Court in D.C. sentenced Manafort to a total term of 73 months. 60 months on the Count 1 conspiracy, with 30 of those months to run concurrent to the Virginia sentence, and 13 months on the Count 1 conspiracy, to be served consecutive to the other 2 sentences. The 2 sentences resulted in a total term of 90 months. So, back to Manafort. He instructed Rick Gates, his deputy on the campaign and a longtime employee, to provide Kalimnik with updates on the Trump campaign, including internal polling data, although Manafort claims not to recall that specific instruction. Manafort expected Kalimnik to share that information with others in Ukraine and with Deripaska. Gates periodically sent such polling data to Kalimnik during the campaign.
Manafort also twice met Kalimnik in the United States during the campaign period and conveyed campaign information. The second meeting took place on August 2, 2016 in New York City. Kalimnik requested the meeting to deliver in person a message from former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, who was then living in Russia. The message was about a peace plan for Ukraine that Manafort has since acknowledged was a backdoor means for Russia to control eastern Ukraine. Several months later, after the presidential election, Kalimnik wrote an email to Manafort expressing the view, which Manafort later said he shared, that the plan's success would require U.S. support to succeed. Quote, all that is required to start the process is a very minor wink or slight push from Donald Trump, end quote. The email also stated that if Manafort were designated as the U.S. representative and started the process, Yanukovych would ensure his reception in Russia, quote, at the very top level. Manafort communicated with Kalimnik about peace plans for Ukraine on at least 4 occasions after their first discussion of the topic on August 2nd. 1. December 2016, the Kalimnik email described above, 2. January 2017, 3. February 2017, and 4. again in the spring of 2018. The office reviewed numerous Manafort email and text communications and asked President Trump about the plan in written questions. The investigation did not uncover evidence of Manafort's passing along information about Ukrainian peace plans to the candidate or anyone else in the campaign or the administration. The office was not, however, able to gain access to all of Manafort's electronic communications. In some instances, messages were sent using encryption applications. And while Manafort denied that he spoke to members of the Trump campaign or the new administration about the peace plan, he lied to the office and the grand jury about the peace plan and his meetings with Kalimnik, and his unreliability on this subject was among the reasons that the district judge found that he had breached his cooperation agreement.
The office could not reliably determine Manafort's purpose in sharing internal polling data with Kalimnik during the campaign period. Manafort, redacted, did not see a downside to sharing campaign information and told Gates that his role in the campaign would be good for business and potentially a way to be made whole for work he previously completed in the Ukraine. As to Deripaska, Manafort claimed that by sharing campaign information with him, Deripaska might see value in their relationship and resolve a disagreement, a reference to one or more outstanding lawsuits. Because of questions about Manafort's credibility and our limited ability to gather evidence on
to the polling data after it was sent to Kalibnik. The office could not assess what Kalibnik or others he may have given it to did with it. The office did not identify evidence of a connection between Manafort's sharing polling data and Russia's interference in the election, which had already been reported by U.S. media outlets at the time of the August 2nd meeting. The investigation did not establish that Manafort otherwise coordinated with the Russian government on its election interference efforts.
Section A, Paul Manafort's ties to Russia and Ukraine. Manafort's Russian contacts during the campaign and transition period stem from his consulting work for Deripaska from approximately 2005 to 2009, and his separate political consulting work in Ukraine from 2005 to 2015, including through his company DMP International LLC, DMI. Kalibnik worked for Manafort in Kiev during this entire period and continued to communicate with Manafort through at least June 2018. Kalibnik, who speaks and writes Ukrainian and Russian, facilitated many of Manafort's communications with Deripaska and Ukrainian oligarchs.
1. Oleg Deripaska consulting work. In approximately 2005, Manafort began working for Deripaska, a Russian oligarch who has a global empire involving aluminum and power companies, who is closely aligned with Vladimir Putin. A memorandum describing work that Manafort performed for Deripaska in 2005 regarding the post-Soviet republics referenced the need to brief the Kremlin and the benefits that the work could confer on the Putin government. Gates described the work Manafort did for Deripaska as political risk insurance, and explained that Deripaska used Manafort to install friendly political officials in countries where Deripaska had business interests. Manafort's company earned tens of millions of dollars from his work for Deripaska and was loaned millions of dollars by Deripaska as well. In 2007, Deripaska invested through another entity in Pericles Emerging Market Partners LP, Pericles, an investment fund created by Manafort and former Manafort business partner Richard Davis. The Pericles Fund was established to pursue investments in Eastern Europe. Deripaska was the sole investor. Gates stated in interviews with the office that the venture led to a deterioration of the relationship between Manafort and Deripaska. In particular, when the fund failed, litigation between Manafort and Deripaska ensued. Gates stated that by 2009, Manafort's business relationship with Deripaska had dried up. According to Gates, various interactions with Deripaska and his intermediaries over the past few years have involved trying to resolve the legal dispute. As described below, in 2016, Manafort, Gates, Kalibnik, and others engaged in efforts to revive the Deripaska relationship and resolve the litigation.
2. Political consulting work. Through Deripaska, Manafort was introduced to Rinat Akhmetov, a Ukrainian oligarch who hired Manafort as a political consultant. In 2005, Akhmetov hired Manafort to engage in political work supporting the Party of Regions, a political party in Ukraine that was generally understood to align with Russia. Manafort assisted the Party of Regions in regaining power, and its candidate, Viktor Yanukovych, won the presidency in 2010. Manafort became a close and trusted political advisor to Yanukovych during his time as president of Ukraine. Yanukovych served in that role until 2014, when he fled to Russia amidst popular protests.
3. Konstantin Kalibnik. Kalibnik is a Russian national who has lived in both Russia and Ukraine and was a longtime Manafort employee. Kalibnik had direct and close access to Yanukovych and his senior entourage, and he facilitated communications between Manafort and his clients, including Yanukovych and multiple Ukrainian oligarchs. Kalibnik also maintained a relationship with Deripaska's deputy, Viktor Boyarkin, a Russian national who previously served in the Defense Attaché Office of the Russian Embassy to the United States. Manafort told the office that he did not believe Kalibnik was working as a Russian spy. The FBI, however, assesses that Kalibnik has ties to Russian intelligence. Several pieces of the office's evidence, including witness interviews and emails obtained through court-authorized search warrants, support that assessment.
Namely, Point 1. Kalibnik was born on April 27, 1970, in a city that I cannot pronounce, then of the Soviet Union, and attended the Military Institute of the Ministry of Defense from 1987 until 1992. Sam Patton, a business partner to Kalimnik, stated that Kalimnik told him that he was a translator in the Russian army for 7 years and that he later worked in the Russian armament industry, selling arms and military equipment. Point 2. U.S. government visa records reveal that Kalimnik obtained a visa to travel to the United States with a Russian diplomatic passport in 1997. Point 3. Kalimnik worked for the International Republic Institute's, or IRI's, Moscow office, where he did translation work and general office management from 1998 to 2005. While another office recalled the incident differently, one former associate of Kalimnik's at IRI told the FBI that Kalimnik was fired from his post because his links to Russian intelligence were too strong. The same individual stated that it was well known at IRI that Kalimnik had links to the Russian government. Point 4. Jonathan Hawker, a British national who was a public relations consultant at FTI Consulting, worked with DMI on a public relations campaign for Yanukovych. After Hawker's work for DMI ended, Kalimnik contacted Hawker about working for a Russian government entity on a public relations project that would promote in Western and Ukrainian media Russia's position on its 2014 invasion of Crimea. Point 5. Gates suspected that Kalimnik was a, quote, spy, a view that he shared with Manafort, Hawker, and Alexander Van der Zwaan, an attorney who had worked with DMI on a report for the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Redacted.
Section B, contacts during Paul Manafort's time with the Trump campaign, subsection 1. Paul Manafort joins the campaign. Manafort served on the Trump campaign from late March to August 19, 2016. On March 29, 2016, the campaign announced that Manafort would serve as the campaign's, quote, convention manager. On May 19, 2016, Manafort was promoted to campaign chairman, and chief strategist Gates, who had been assisting Manafort on the campaign, was appointed deputy campaign chairman. Thomas Barrett and Roger Stone both recommended Manafort to candidate Trump. In early 2016, at Manafort's request, Barrett suggested to Trump that Manafort join the campaign to manage the Republican convention. Stone had worked with Manafort from approximately 1980 until the mid-1990s through various consulting and lobbying firms. Manafort met Trump in 1982 when Trump hired the Black, Manafort, Stone, and Kelly lobbying firm. Over the years, Manafort saw Trump at political and social events in New York City and at Stone's wedding, and Trump requested VIP status at the 1988 and 1996 Republican conventions worked by Manafort. According to Gates, in March 2016, Manafort traveled to Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida to meet with Trump. Trump hired him at that time. Manafort agreed to work on the campaign without pay. Manafort had no meaningful income at this point in time, but resuscitating his domestic political campaign career could be financially beneficial in the future. Gates reported that Manafort intended, if Trump won the presidency, to remain outside the administration and monetize his relationship with the administration.
2. Paul Manafort's campaign period contacts. Immediately upon joining the campaign, Manafort directed Gates to prepare for his review separate memoranda addressed to Deripaska, Akametov, Serhiy Lyovochkin, and Boris Kolennikov. The last 3 being Ukrainian oligarchs who were senior. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so those guys, they were senior opposition bloc officials. There you go. The memorandum described Manafort's appointment to the Trump campaign and indicated his willingness to consult on Ukrainian politics in the future. On March 30th, 2016, Gates emailed the memoranda and a press release announcing Manafort's appointment to Kalimnik for translation and dissemination. Manafort later followed up with Kalimnik to ensure his messages had been delivered, emailing on April 11, 2016, to ask whether Kalimnik had shown our friends the media coverage of his new role. Kalemnik replied, absolutely, every article. Manafort further added, how do we use to get whole? Has OVD, Oleg Vladimirovich Deripaschke, Operation seen? Kalemnik wrote back the same day, yes, I have been sending everything to Viktor Boyarkin, Deripaschke's deputy, who had been forwarding the coverage directly to OVD. Gates reported that Manafort said that being hired on the campaign would be good for business and increase the likelihood that Manafort would be paid the approximately $2 million he was owed for previous political consulting work in the Ukraine. Gates also explained to the office that Manafort thought his role on the campaign could help confirm that Deripaschke had dropped the Pericles lawsuit, and that Gates believed Manafort sent polling data to Deripaschke, as discussed further below, so that Deripaschke would not move forward with his lawsuit against Manafort. Gates further stated that Deripaschke wanted a visa to the United States, that Deripaschke could believe that having Manafort in a position inside the campaign or administration might be helpful to Deripaschke, and that Manafort's relationship with Trump could help Deripaschke in other ways as well. Gates stated, however, that Manafort never told him anything specific about what, if anything, Manafort might be offering Deripaschke.
Gates also reported that Manafort instructed him in April 2016 or early May 2016 to send Kalemnik campaign internal polling data and other updates so that Kalemnik in turn could share it with Ukrainian oligarchs. Gates understood that the information would also be shared with Deripaschke, redacted. Gates reported to the office that he did not know why Manafort wanted him to send polling information, but Gates thought it was a way to showcase Manafort's work, and Manafort wanted to open doors to jobs after the Trump campaign ended. Gates said that Manafort's instruction included sending internal polling data prepared for the Trump campaign by pollster Tony Fabrizio. Fabrizio had worked with Manafort for years and was brought into the campaign by Manafort. Gates stated that, in accordance with Manafort's instructions, he had periodically sent Kalemnik polling data via WhatsApp. Gates then deleted the communications on a daily basis. Gates further told the office that after Manafort left the campaign in mid-August, Gates sent Kalemnik polling data less frequently, and that the data he sent was more publicly available information and less internal data. Gates' account about polling data is consistent, redacted with multiple emails that Kalemnik sent to U.S. associates and press contacts between late July and mid-August 2016. Those emails reference internal polling, describe the status of the Trump campaign and Manafort's role in it, and assess Trump's prospects for victory. Manafort did not acknowledge instructing Gates to send Kalemnik internal data. Redacted. And some more redacted. And redacted some more.
The office also obtained contemporaneous emails that shed light on the purpose of the communications with Deripaschke and that are consistent with Gates' accounts. For example, in response to a July 7, 2016 email from a Ukrainian reporter about Manafort's failed Deripaschke-backed investment, Manafort asked Kalemnik whether there had been any movement on this issue with our friend. Gates stated that our friend likely referred to Deripaschke, and Manafort told the office that the issue and our biggest interest, as stated below, was a solution to the Deripaschke-Pericles issue. Kalemnik replied,
I'm carefully optimistic on the question of our biggest interest. Our friend Boyarkin said there's lately significantly more attention to the campaign in his boss's, Deripaschke's, mind, and he will be most likely looking for ways to reach out to you pretty soon, understanding all this time sensitivity. I'm more than sure that it will be resolved and we will get back to the original relationship with V's boss.
Deripaschke. 8 minutes later, Manafort replied that Kalemnik should tell Boyarkin's boss, a reference to Deripaschke, that if he needed private briefings, they could accommodate. Manafort has alleged to the office that he was willing to brief Deripaschke only on public campaign matters and gave an example. Why Trump selected Mike Pence as the vice presidential running mate. Manafort said he never gave Deripaschke a briefing. Manafort noted that if Trump won, Deripaschke would want to use Manafort to advance whatever interests Deripaschke had in the United States and elsewhere.
3. Paul Manafort's 2 campaign period meetings with Konstantin Kilimnik and the United States. Manafort twice met with Kilimnik in person during the campaign period, once in May and again in August 2016. The first meeting took place on May 7, 2016 in New York City. In the days leading to the meeting, Kilimnik had been working to gather information about the political situation in Ukraine. That included information gleaned from a trip that former Party of Regions official Yuri Boyko had recently taken to Moscow, a trip that likely included meetings between Boyko and high-ranking Russian officials. Kilimnik then traveled to Washington, D.C. on or about May 5, 2016. While in Washington, Kilimnik had prearranged meetings with State Department employees. Late on the evening of May 6, Gates arranged for Kilimnik to take a 3 a.m. train to meet Manafort in New York for breakfast on May 7. According to Manafort, during the meeting, he and Kilimnik talked about events in Ukraine, and Manafort briefed Kilimnik on the Trump campaign, expecting Kilimnik to pass the information back to individuals in Ukraine and elsewhere. Manafort stated that opposition bloc members recognized Manafort's position on the campaign was an opportunity, but Kilimnik did not ask for anything. Kilimnik spoke about a plan of Boyko to boost election participation in the eastern zone of Ukraine, which was the base for the opposition bloc. Kilimnik returned to Washington, D.C. right after the meeting with Manafort.
Manafort met with Kilimnik the second time at the Grand Havana Club in New York City on the evening of August 2, 2016. The events leading to the meeting are as follows. On July 28, 2016, Kilimnik flew from Kiev to Moscow. The next day, Kilimnik wrote to Manafort, requesting that they meet using coded language about a conversation he had had that day. In an email with the subject line, "Black Caviar," Kilimnik wrote,
I met today with the guy who gave you your biggest black caviar jar several years ago. We spent about 5 hours talking about his story, and I have several important messages from him to you. He asked me to go and brief you on our conversation. I said I have to run it by you first, but in principle I am prepared to do it. ... It has to do about the future of his country and is quite interesting.
Manafort identified, quote, the guy who gave you your biggest black caviar jar, end quote, as Yanukovych. He explained that in 2010, he and Yanukovych had lunch to celebrate the recent presidential election. Yanukovych gave Manafort a large jar of actual black caviar that was worth approximately $30,000 to $40,000.
Yeah.
Manafort's identification of Yanukovych as, quote, the guy who gave you your biggest black caviar jar, end quote, is consistent with Kilimnik being in Moscow where Yanukovych resided. When Kilimnik wrote, quote, I met today with the guy, end quote, and with the December 2016 email in which Kilimnik referred to Yanukovych as, quote, BG, end quote, redacted. Manafort replied to Kilimnik's July 29th email, quote, Tuesday is best, Tuesday or Wednesday, in New York City, end quote.
Side note, the guy who gave you your biggest black caviar jar is a really great anime series.
All right, 3 days later, on July 31st, 2016, Kilimnik flew back to Kiev from Moscow, and on that same day wrote to Manafort that he needed about 2 hours for their meeting because, quote, it is a long caviar story to tell. Kilimnik wrote that he would arrive at JFK on August 2nd at 7:30 p.m., and he and Manafort agreed to a late dinner that night. Documentary evidence, including flight, phone, and hotel records, and the timing of text messages exchanged, confirms the dinner took place as planned on August 2nd. As to the contents of the meeting itself, the accounts of Manafort and Gates, who arrived late to the dinner, differ in certain respects. But their version of events, when assessed alongside available documentary evidence and what Kilimnik told business associate Sam Patton, indicate that at least 3 principal topics were discussed.
First, Manafort and Kilimnik discussed a plan to resolve the ongoing political problems in Ukraine by creating an autonomous republic in its more industrialized eastern region of Donbass, and having Yanukovych, the Ukrainian president ousted in 2014, elected to head that republic. That plan, Manafort later acknowledged, constituted a backdoor means for Russia to control eastern Ukraine. Manafort initially said that if he had not cut off the discussion, Kalimnik would have asked Manafort in the August 2nd meeting to convince Trump to come out in favor of the peace plan, and Yanukovych would have expected Manafort to use his connections in Europe and Ukraine to support the plan. Manafort also initially told the office that he had said to Kalimnik that the plan was crazy, that the discussion ended, and that he did not recall Kalimnik asking Manafort to reconsider the plan after their August 2nd meeting. Manafort said that he reacted negatively to Yanukovych sending, years later, an urgent request when Yanukovych needed him. When confronted with an email written by Kalimnik on or about December 8, 2016, however, Manafort acknowledged Kalimnik raised the peace plan again in that email. Manafort ultimately acknowledged Kalimnik also raised the peace plan in January and February 2017 meetings with Manafort redacted.
Second, Manafort briefed Kalimnik on the state of the Trump campaign and Manafort's plan to win the election. That briefing encompassed the campaign's messaging and its internal polling data. According to Gates, it also included discussion of battleground states, which Manafort identified as Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Minnesota. Manafort did not refer explicitly to battleground states in his telling of the August 2nd discussion, redacted. Third, according to Gates and what Kalimnik told Patton, Manafort, and Kalimnik discussed two sets of financial disputes related to Manafort's previous work in the region. Those consisted of the unresolved Deripaska lawsuit and the funds that the opposition bloc owed to Manafort for his political consulting work, and how Manafort might be able to obtain payment. After the meeting, Gates and Manafort both stated that they left separately from Kalimnik because they knew the media was tracking Manafort and wanted to avoid media reporting on his connections to Kalimnik.
C. Post-resignation activities. Manafort resigned from the Trump campaign in mid-August 2016, approximately 2 weeks after his second meeting with Kalimnik, amidst negative media reporting about his political consulting work for the pro-Russian party of regions in Ukraine. Despite his resignation, Manafort continued to offer advice to various campaign officials through the November election. Manafort told Gates that he still spoke with Kushner, Bannon, and candidate Trump, and some of those post-resignation contacts are documented in emails. For example, on October 21st, 2016, Manafort sent Kushner an email and attached a strategy memorandum proposing that the campaign make the case against Clinton, quote, as the failed and corrupt champion of the establishment, end quote, and that, quote, WikiLeaks provides the Trump campaign the ability to make the case in a very credible way by using the words of Clinton, its campaign officials, and DNC members, end quote. Later, in a November 5th, 2016 email to Kushner entitled, quote, securing the victory, end quote, Manafort stated that he was, quote, feeling really good about our prospects on Tuesday and focusing on preserving the victory, end quote, and that he was concerned the Clinton campaign would respond to a loss by, quote, moving immediately to discredit the Trump victory in plain voter fraud and cyber fraud, including the claim that the Russians had hacked into the voting machines and tampered with the results, end quote. That's a terrifying statement. Trump was elected president on November 8, 2016. Manafort told the office that in the wake of Trump's victory, he was not interested in an administration job. Manafort instead preferred to stay on the, quote, outside, end quote, and monetize his campaign position to generate business given his familiarity and relationship with Trump and the incoming administration. Manafort appeared to follow that plan as he traveled to the Middle East, Cuba, South Korea, Japan, and China, and was paid to explain what Trump presidency would entail.
Manafort's activities in early 2017 included meetings relating to Ukraine and Russia. The first meeting, which took place in Madrid, Spain in January 2017, was with Gregory Oganov, who had previously worked at the Russian embassy in the United States, was a senior executive at a Deripaska company and was believed to report directly to Deripaska. Manafort initially denied attending the meeting. When he later acknowledged it, he claimed that the meeting had been arranged by his lawyers and concerned only the Paracels lawsuit. Other evidence, however, provides reason to doubt Manafort's statement that the sole topic of the meeting was the Paracels lawsuit. In particular, text messages to Manafort from a number associated with Kalimnik suggest that Kalimnik and Boyarkin, not Manafort's counsel, had arranged the meeting between Manafort and
Oganov. Kalimnik's messages states that the meeting was supposed to be not about money or parables, but instead about recreating the old friendship, ostensibly between Manafort and Deripaska, and talking about global politics. Manafort also replied by text that he needs this finished before January 20th, which appears to be a reference to resolving parables before the inauguration.
On January 15, 2017, 3 days after his return from Madrid, Manafort emailed K.T. McFarland, who was at that time designated to be Deputy National Security Advisor and was formally appointed to that position on January 20th, 2017. Manafort's January 15 email to McFarland stated, "I have some important information I want to share that I picked up on my travels over the last month." Manafort told the office that the email referred to an issue regarding Cuba, not Russia or Ukraine, and Manafort had traveled to Cuba in the past month. Either way, McFarland, who was advised by Flynn not to respond to the Manafort inquiry, appears not to have responded to Manafort. Manafort told the office that around the time of the presidential inauguration in January, he met with Kalimnik and Ukrainian oligarch Sergei Lyobochkin at the Westin Hotel in Alexandria, Virginia. During that meeting, Kalimnik again discussed the Yanukovych peace plan that he had broached at the August 2nd meeting and a detailed December 8th, 2016 message found in Kalimnik's DNP email account. In that December 8th email, which Manafort acknowledged having read, Kalimnik wrote, "All that is required to start the process is a very minor wink or slight push from DT." An apparent reference to President-elect Trump. And a decision to authorize you to be a special representative and manage this process. Kalimnik assured Manafort, with that authority, he could start the process and within 10 days visit Russia. Yanukovych guarantees your reception at the very top level, and that DT would have peace in Ukraine basically within a few months after inauguration.
As noted above, redacted in statements to the office, Manafort sought to qualify his engagement on and support for the plan. Redacted, 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 redacted. On February 26, 2017, Manafort met Kalimnik in Madrid, where Kalimnik had flown from Moscow. In his first two interviews with the office, Manafort denied meeting with Kalimnik on his Madrid trip, and then, after being confronted with documentary evidence that Kalimnik was in Madrid at the same time as him, recognized that he met him in Madrid. Manafort said that Kalimnik had updated him on a criminal investigation into so-called, quote, black ledger payments to Manafort that was being conducted by Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau. Redacted.
Manafort remained in contact with Kalimnik throughout 2017 and into the spring of 2018. Those contacts included matters pertaining to the criminal charges brought by the office and the Ukraine peace plan. In early 2018, Manafort retained his longtime polling firm to draft poll in Ukraine, sent to pollsters a 3-page primer on the plan sent by Kalimnik, and worked with Kalimnik to formulate the polling questions. The primer sent specifically called for the U.S. and President Trump to support the autonomous Republic of Donbass with Yanukovych as Prime Minister, and a series of questions in the draft poll asked for opinions on Yanukovych's role in resolving the conflict in Donbass. The poll was not solely about Donbass, it also sought participants' views on leaders apart from Yanukovych as they pertain to the 2019 Ukraine presidential election. The office has not uncovered evidence that Manafort brought the Ukraine peace plan to the attention of the Trump campaign or the Trump administration. Kalimnik continued his efforts to promote the peace plan to the executive branch, e.g. U.S. Department of State, into the summer of 2018.
That's it, folks, we did it! Woo! It is right at 9 o'clock.
You get a big black jar.
There you go.
And you get a big black jar of caviar. Jar of caviar.
We don't have that money. Yeah.
Alright, so, real quick, thank you all so much for coming out. We really appreciate it. The North Door is going to try to close up really quick, so if you have a tab open, please close out. Please remember to be generous to the staff here. They've been very kind to us, and we want to share that with them monetarily if possible. We will be back next Sunday, is that right?
Yeah, next Sunday.
We're back here next Sunday. Doors at 5, show at 5:30. Please come and listen to some more awful, heinous things that our current president and his friends did to become president. It's fascinating.
He's a child rapist.
Okay.
I'm sorry, our president is a child rapist.
Yes, and then prosecution decisions will also be forthcoming. Thank you again for being here. I hope you have a good night. Please remember to vote, and remember, regardless of who your favorite Democratic candidate is, vote for whoever wins. Thank you and have a good night.